Good evening. The time is 6:30. It is Tuesday, January 11th. I'd like to call this regularly scheduled Planning and Zoning meeting to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Snyder.
Here.
McCall.
Here.
Guerra.
Here.
James. Chase.
Here.
Thank you. 4 members present. We have a quorum. Next, item number 3, nominations and elections of chair and vice chair. We'd start with chair, correct? Okay, yes. Are there any nominations for chair?
I would like to make a nomination.
Yes, please.
I feel like we have people who have experience on this board, and we have people like me who don't have experience on this board. So I would like to see someone who has experience in running the meeting and understanding that process. So I recommend Alex as chair.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any other nominations that would like to be made before we vote? Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next, vice chair. Are there any nominations for vice chair?
I would like to make a nomination.
Yes, Commissioner
For the
Schneider.
same reason, people with experience versus people without experience, which I'm considering me. I would like to nominate Megan as vice chair.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you accept the
I do.
nomination?
Thank you.
Good. Are there any other nominations? Okay. Okay, it has been moved and seconded to nominate Commissioner McCall as vice chair. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Item number 4, minutes. 4A, Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes for December 14th, 2021.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
thank you. It has been moved by Commissioner Chase,
I'd like to second.
okay, and seconded by Commissioner McCall, or Vice Chair McCall. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Item number 5, citizen comments. At this time, any citizen that would like to speak, you may. We ask that you limit your time to 3 minutes and that you address the commission. If we do have multiple items today that do have public hearings, so you will have an opportunity to speak during those items as well. But if you would like to speak now, you may please come up to the podium. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Amber Lewis. I am the new Assistant City Manager for the city. I am over Development Services and Community Development. I grew up in Nebraska, went to school in Nebraska, married a Texan, so we live in Texas. So happy to be here, and Kyle, lots of great things going on here, and I look forward to working with you all. Thanks.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you so much.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Dex Ellison, College City Council Member, Place 1 at large. I come to you this evening, first and foremost, congratulations, Chair and Vice Chair McCall, on your nominations and appointment. Commissioner McCall, I feel like you've been on here since I left the P&Z Commission, so great to be respected for your tenure and experience, certainly. I just wanted to say a few words this evening about just the position you all are in, and as well as some comments that I have for you all. First and foremost, I can't thank you all enough for the service that you all provide. I've come before your body before, Your body is one that is on TV that I can watch and don't always have to come to these meetings, but I do watch many, if not all, of your meetings. And I appreciate your deliberation and discussion on the various different items that are concerning of our city before making a recommendation to council. It helps a great deal to understand that dialogue from our residents before it even comes to us. And as being a fellow, a past P&Z commissioner, I'm fully aware too of the strain that it puts on you all when your body is not at full staff. And so I just wanted to come and encourage you all to continue pushing forward. The council certainly appreciates, this will be probably the only time I'll speak on behalf of the council, I just speak on behalf of myself, appreciates what you all do. And we need our volunteer residents on our various boards and commissions to be available and do the work that we have before them, and you all have been exceptional in that, and I certainly appreciate that. I know the times are tough with the board being so small, but I encourage you all to stay the course. We are moving forward as I will be bringing forward an agenda item at our next council meeting. If you might remember on our May 4th meeting, if not, it's all recorded on video. Our May 4th meeting, agenda item 31, I brought forward an agenda item to have council have joint meetings with our boards and commissions. And I'm bringing that back forward to solidify that time that we discuss. I've said this before, one of the most important meetings I had as a planning and zoning commissioner was when I had that joint meeting with council. And got a full breadth of the understanding of what my role is, what my expectations were, the vision of those that were elected and appointed me and my colleagues to that position. And so I really look forward to that opportunity with you all, and I hope we can have that in the very near future. Once again, I speak on behalf of myself, stating that we are in the process of coming up with a new policy. I'm sure you all have been following that. The council has made a decision. I know that can be put a strain and probably a little concern in your minds, but you all have my firmest commitment to work as hard as we can on getting that taken care of so we can move forward. I've said many times how I feel about the previous policy, so I won't elaborate on that, but I just want you all to know that you all are appreciated, and we wanted to work with you. I'm excited to work with you, and I appreciate the job that you all do each and every week that y'all come here and in the time in between. So just hang tight with us. We are working forward to it, and I look forward to working with you all this year and having a really great year with you all. Thank you all.
Thank you, Councilmember. Is there anyone else who would like to speak during citizen comments? Okay, seeing none, I will close citizen comments. Citizen comments is now closed. Next, item 6. Consent agenda. We have consent agenda for A and B.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Chase.
I'd like to make a motion to approve consent as presented.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Commissioner Chase, seconded by Commissioner Snydow. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion passes. Next, item 7, zoning, 7A. Consider request by Sean Ratterree of CTC Residential LLC, Z-21-0091, to rezone approximately 15.542 acres of land to PUD MXD for a property located at 5839 Kyle Parkway in Hayes County, Texas. There is a public hearing on this item. There's no objections. I'm going to open public hearing. If there's anyone who would, if anyone would like to speak on this item, you may come up now. Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Next, Mr. Atkinson.
Do you care if I just sit here and present? Or all right,
That's
cool.
fine.
Hold on. All right, before you we have I can't talk tonight. Petition number Z21-0091. It is a PUD with vertical mixed use and a combination of that and multifamily behind it. The applicant has come forward and is wanting to develop the site between Seton Hospital and Lowe's, right along Seton Parkway. It's approximately 15 and a half acres, and right now it's considered, or it's zoned retail services. All the way around it, in every direction with the exception of the southeast where the hospital is, it's all the adjacent properties are zoned retail services. The hospital is zoned hospital services. With the exception of the hospital, all the adjacent properties are actually vacant right now for this section of the intersection at 1626 and I-35. They're mostly smaller pad sites surrounding it, just so y'all are aware. Retail services is a zoning district that allows general highway commercial. Most of y'all are familiar with it from our zoning perspective. Restaurants, hotels, you name it. Nothing industrial. But they're requesting to rezone it to vertical mixed use. They want to put 2 vertical mixed use buildings right up against Seton Parkway on the west side of it, approximately 3 or 4 stories with ground floor commercial in it. Pulling it up to the streetscape and to activate it, they're going to have a large area out in front for pedestrian aspects and the vibe trail system that we're working to implement. And then behind it, they're going to have 4 100% multifamily buildings. The way we're moving forward generally with direction when it comes to vertical mixed use is to allow perimeter vertical mixed use and then allow interior to the site 100% multifamily buildings. It helps us accomplish a goal from vertical mixed use generally, but also kind of massages out the requirements from our MXD zoning district that makes it more palatable also at the same time to developers. So we're trying to meet a common goal here in that kind of stuff, which is why they asked for a PUD. With PUDs, you're allowed to create a more flexible environment, something that better suits the market to help promote the city at the same time. And that's why we go for it. We try to make a better product, especially when every time we meet with a developer and we say, hey, let's do mixed use, and then they take a look at our code, and there's aspects of it that just do not function very well the way it's written. So so from a comprehensive standpoint, comprehensive plan, everything on the screen there in red is the super regional node. It's the highest intensity and density of land use inside the city of Kyle. The site's entirely within it. You have a Newtown community and regional node to the north across the creek there. MXD is recommended in the super regional node, and its intent is to create density and create walkability and just development patterns that match that. So what they're asking for is 100% on board from that perspective. What they are planning on doing, I already mentioned the 2 vertical mixed-use buildings. They'll be the main entrance into the project. The northern vertical mixed-use building is intended to house a microbrewery or something similar to that intent, and an outside dining entertainment area to help create a vibe spot right next to the trail itself. In my staff report, I have approximately 1,900 linear feet of the vibe trail. That is an estimate. It may not be the exact number, but when they come in for site development permits and related permits, if it functions the way they're showing in their concept plans in the back of material, that's what's important. Putting in some parallel parking along the southern boundary and the western edge of Seton Parkway with associated urban streetscape. There are certain exemptions in our MXD code that better helps bring this project to fruition that we have in the PUD. Again, the 4 non-vertical mixed-use buildings, the changes to the parking ratio calculations to better make it easier to massage a little bit. And then they're going to be dedicating right-of-way for the future Seton Parkway expansion across the creek to the north. That's on our transportation master plan. So we ask that y'all approve it or recommend approval. I'm also going to pull up the PUD zoning ordinance here real quick. I just had it. There we go. Just so for those who are watching it on TV, they can see what we're talking about. I did receive a phone call from Commissioner Snidow today, and she made a very good point, and the applicant is also aware of the conversation we had. She had some concerns about the intersection of Kyle Parkway and Seton Parkway to the south, which is literally only a 4-way stop, but it's a intersection of a 2-lane and a 6-lane road. With new development coming online, per our code, they have to pay our adjacent lane mile fee or make improvements in lieu of. So the Transportation Master Plan shows a traffic circle there. So we don't know the expected cost yet of a traffic circle. It has to be engineered with cost estimates associated with it. But the applicant and staff will be having further discussions related to intersections improvements there. Let's see here. We're looking at adding golf cart parking, certainly on the vibe spot itself, but they can also add it into as well. That's going to be further on down the list in our packet today where we're talking about actual code amendments to the vibe stuff. Let's see here, 12-foot wide trail. Some limits on the ground floor commercial, what they cannot have. Some changes to the setback lines and what have you. And then it references sections of the MXD code to make it, again, more palatable. So you can see here on the screen as it's scrolling up. This is the general concept plan. It's not going to be exactly like this, but as long as it generally conforms with this idea from a code perspective and a design, that's what we're looking for. The gray line along the southeast-west, and then the going north is the Vibe Trail, and then the pink, or on my screen, the orange and the brown buildings are the vertical mixed use. This is the sidewalk system that we expect, or something similar to it. The blue being internal sidewalks, the red being the Vibe Trail. And then the green right there is going to be the street trees along the Vibe Trail. Do y'all have any questions for me?
Any questions for staff?
So along the lines of our conversation today, and just for my fellow commissioners, and when I looked at this, I mean, this is an awesome project, first of all. You know, I love the retail. We're all about mixed use, vertical housing, all of that. It's beautiful. And just for me personally, I think, while I've worked with communities that are food deserts, I think Kyle is a microbrew desert. We could use a few more in town, so I think that's a plus as well. The real challenge I had was the multifamily housing and that intersection. That 4-way stop is a serious hazard right now. It is 6 lanes across if you count the turn lanes, and it's just not appropriate for a 4-way stop. So I couldn't support the density of adding housing on that site without something being done with that intersection. So are you going to coordinate the timing of resolving the intersection, or how's that going to work out, or just big picture?
Yes. In short,
trust you.
Yeah, no, it's definitely going to require further conversations internally with staff, negotiating out exactly what we're looking for there. Again, the Transportation Master Plan does state that there's an expectation for a traffic circle there. I'm not a civil engineer, so when I say this, it depends on the engineering, but a single lane traffic circle is probably going to be too small for that intersection. So it'll probably need to be at least 2 lanes, but it needs to be engineered appropriately. So it is a conversation that we'll be discussing following this meeting, probably not tonight, but in the next coming days, and then make sure that council is also on board with the idea of the negotiations going on too. So there's going to be probably a little bit of back and forth, and we'll take care of it. And then we'll solidify it in the PUD or an associated ancillary document related to like some of the subdivision standards, or also architectural style too. So.
And then right now we're just looking at the zoning of this, but because it's a PUD, this is pretty much what we're approving. So if there's any like major changes, they would have to come back, even if it stays.
Major changes, yes. While we don't state what major changes are and what's a minor change,
Okay.
It needs to largely function in the manner that's presented. There can be little tweaks and a little bit of movement around here and there, but, you know, from an MXD perspective, we're going to want that retail and multifamily up against as close as we can to Seton Parkway. We want it to function in an urban manner. The city of Kyle, essentially, for all intents and purposes, is done with garden-style apartments. So any multifamily moving forward is going to have a more urban feel to it. We want it to be walkable. We want it to be relatively compact. The more compact, the better. But we also have to take into account the market as well. You know, when we of course we want them to have a multi-story parking structure, but also that's extremely expensive to the point where it may not make the project viable. We haven't had that discussion internally, but you know, so parking in this case is going to be surface parking, and we're just trying to make it work effectively. So, and get the results that we want, and also, yeah. So,
Right.
I start rambling, but yeah.
No, I think that's a good move towards this sort of development.
Any other questions for staff?
Yeah, just to piggyback. So under the PUD 2D, you have that they are not required to do any type of traffic studies for the development. I'm assuming this is just a form and not what's been negotiated with them?
Yeah, so the conversation that we started having related to the traffic circle was late this afternoon. So there's going to be some adjustments to this document and to figure that out. And so we'll account for those items that need to be adjusted for. Generally, the way our subdivision code reads, we don't actually have a provision for traffic impact analysis. And at this time, we don't have staff on board that can effectively analyze it either. So I think that's one of the goals is to hire somebody, but that's beside the point. But following that, I'm wondering if there's going to be revisions to our code related to that, because right now it's a very simple chart in terms of how we calculate the related. It's not an impact fee; it's an operation and road maintenance fee. It's a one-time fee per developers, and so it's based on the type of land use, and there's a amortization amount and a cost figure, and it's a very simple equation.
It's developer friendly, and I appreciate that. But if we're starting to go vertical and we're starting to condense, we need to make sure that we're adding that element in there. Last thing we need is high density with tons of traffic.
Right. So it's going to generate traffic without a doubt. So yeah,
Yeah.
and you're right. It does need to be effectively managed.
Cool.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, I have a couple. So first, you mentioned parking, and I saw that it said changes to the parking ratio calculations in the MXD zoning district to better clarify expectations. So I also saw from there, I think it was 1.65 spaces per
Residential unit.
residential unit. Is that, how did you get to that number? Is that what we do for multifamily usually?
So generally for multifamily, but not necessarily the MXD zoning district.
Right.
It is 2 spaces minimum and a half space additionally for each bedroom above 2 bedrooms. So if you got 3 bedrooms, you got 2.5. If you're at 4 bedrooms, you're at 3. And that's the way our multifamily code reads. And so that's a really high number to be able to try to work out implementation of an urban form. And so if I had my way about it, I wouldn't have any minimums and I have maximums, but that's not the way our code reads. So we have to be careful where we can reduce it down to what's probably an appropriate number, but also that to the point where there's enough parking for the residents at the same time. So about 1.65 between 1 and 2 unit parking spaces per unit, averaged out over the site, is a sweet spot generally. And that's just from other conversations we've had with other developers and what have you too. So it's not just Mr. Ratterree's project. So just yeah. So.
Okay. And so there's the 1.65 per unit. And then in addition, there's also the requirement for what would be the commercial parking, basically, even though it's not really, I mean, there doesn't seem to be a commercial area parking and a residential area parking, at least from these designs, but that's also included?
Yes, so in addition to the multifamily, you're looking at 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. And gross floor area is just multiple floors of commercial, right? So in this case, if they're only having ground floor, it's just gonna be the square footage of the ground floor. So again, this is a concept plan. It doesn't get into the really detailed design of how they're gonna partition the commercial, we're gonna call it public parking, even though it's not public, but where people can access it and park and enjoy the outdoor dining experience and what have you. When we start getting into the site development permit, that's where we'll really flesh that out and look at their design and make sure it makes sense, make sure that there's adequate access points to it and what have you. And also that, because the last thing the developer is going to want, and I'm speaking for you, is that their residents don't have enough parking, and that can start to get dicey if you're adjacent to commercial. So
Well, and if they don't have enough parking, they'll just move into the commercial parking.
right, and sometimes the commercial, they don't like that either
Right.
because they want high turnover. So from their parking.
Can I add something, or is this your?
Yes, but just a moment. Yep. But yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, I have another question, but I'll definitely yield the floor to
Okay.
the developer.
Yeah, man, come on up.
Hey guys, my name is Sean Ratterree. I just wanted to add the 1.65 parking spots was a minimum for us for the residential units. We really want to see that in the 1.7s if we can. I just wanted to be careful with the minimum to make sure we had enough room for the commercial, retail, potential restaurants, and that. So I just want to clarify that.
Thank you. Next, I have a question about the, okay, so MXD, just MXD, not a PUD, just MXD. The expectation is every building is mixed use, correct?
Correct.
So I believe, I'm not sure if it has to be the bottom floor, but that's kind of the assumption. Bottom floor, commercial, or something other than residential, above units are residential for the most part, correct?
Yes, if you had a project that you created successfully with our mixed-use zoning district in Division 26, all buildings have to have a ground floor commercial component. And they're allowed to have residential on floors 2 through whatever height they're allowed to get.
Okay.
So
So the exception we're giving here is that 4 of the 6 buildings will not be required to have any commercial. They'll be completely multifamily.
that is correct.
Okay. It is the 2 that's in the front of the property that will have a ground floor commercial, everything else residential. Then every other building behind those 2 will have complete multifamily.
Yes.
Okay. I'll actually talk more with you guys in discussion, but just want to make sure I clarified that. Okay, any other questions for staff? Okay. Are there any motions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve item 7A.
Thank you. It's been moved by Commissioner Chase, and is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Commissioner Snydow. Is there any discussion? Okay, so discussion is a time kind of where we can talk to each other and, kind of help push each other along. And I've got to say that there are some things in this item that I very much am supportive of. We've said it already. And East Kyle specifically, having more things that set it apart is something I'm always a fan of. The addition of the vibe, and then just having options such as a possible microbrewery or something to that effect is good. And I'm also generally always in favor of MXD. I believe mixed use is a good is a good option because, you know, we don't want to lose our residential, I'm sorry, we don't want to lose our retail services area. We only have so much of it, and we've already given up quite a bit to various subdivisions and so on. And so losing more of it is tricky. But on the flip side, you also want to have your density where things are. People should be right off the trail system. People should be near the hospital, near all those businesses. So the way to have that both come in line to not lose your retail services and to also have density there, MXD is a great option for both of those. The issue is, how much is the right level to give up? When a very small percentage of this property will now still be retail, the bottom floor of 2 of the 6 buildings. And so I believe there is quite a bit going for this item. And this is another reason why I'm very, very glad that a council member is here, and I hope other council members are watching or will watch before their meeting, because this is a thing that really should be considered. How much of a consideration should we give to this? And so how much leniency should we have to what MXD actually is? And so this is something I'm definitely on the fence about. And I want to bring it up in discussion, see if anyone else had a thought and help sway me one way or the other.
So I agree. But I think you need to look at, or we need to look at, and council needs to look at the location. What's the expectation? What else is going to go there? You're not going to get a big box retailer because they're not going to be able to have their signage front out on I-35 where they're going to pull off the highway to go to that store. That premium space is still available down the corridor, but as you start going deeper in, it goes away. So you're not going to see larger retail spaces take up those areas. It's just not something that happens. I think of like the Domain in North Austin. You know, that's a lot of residential and mixed use within that area. And I think that is something that we should look at within this community is bringing that type of aspect in, which I think this project does.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I agree. I think that, yeah, it would be really nice to have a lot more retail, but you've got that natural sort of public area, and then once you get back, it's going to be more private, and the sort of tenants with the signage and attracting retail in that area would be, I think, difficult, especially with the parking right in the middle. So I think it's designed pretty well.
Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion passes. Next, item 7B. Consider a request by the City of Kyle, Z-21-0092, to rezone approximately 45.5 acres of land from RS to PUD, RS-19 acres, MXD 26.5 acres, for property located at 20139 IH-35 in Hays County, Texas. There is a public hearing on this item. There's no objections. I'm going to open the public hearing. Public hearing is now open. If there's anyone who'd like to speak on this item, you may come up now. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Public hearing is now closed. Mr. Atkinson.
Thank you. Will Atkinson, Senior Planner for the record. To begin with, I want to apologize for the lack of backup material on the item. We were pretty much negotiating right up to the very end on this one to get it to a place that was ready for the Planning and Zoning Commission to see, which is why y'all have paper packets related to it. There's not going to be anything up on the screen related to it. This is a city-initiated PUD zoning that I don't know if y'all remember Ooh, it was about a year ago. We had, for the same property, a rezoning request from the same applicants to rezone the 9 acres up front for retail services and then R33 behind it for the remaining bit off of the interstate. In the end, council decided not to pass it. They didn't want to see more straight multifamily, and in the process, so it had to, for them to come back, they would have had to wait a while to ask the same question. So since then, there's been a lot of discussion for this area of the city, not just associated with this this acreage here, but north of Beebe Road, east of this point, and everything like that. And we're trying to begin a more cohesive design. And this is only a small component of it, so we can only talk about this tract today. What was posted is 19 acres to retail services and 26 and a half acres to vertical mixed use, which this request went forward very fast and over the holidays, so there wasn't a lot of time to do a lot of due diligence. And so I'll be honest, we did make a mistake on actually noticing it in the newspaper, but we've accounted for it within the PUD document itself because of the flexibility that's allowed. So what's effectively going to happen is if you're looking at A1, they're allowed to utilize MXD in the eastern 10 acres of the retail services tract, which is the first 9 acres up against I-35. And then there's further exhibits at the end, so it'll better clarify it. But this project is a relatively similar project to the previous agenda item, where they're going to have some vertical mixed-use components to it, some 100% multifamily buildings, but then they have some retail pad sites specifically along the I-35 frontage, some standalone ones. So from a project enhancement standpoint, they're going to have to dedicate their portion or their required deficit of the Beebe Road right-of-way. It's a total of 60 feet required per the Transportation Master Plan. They're going to need to widen Beebe Road to allow for a center turn lane. It's approximately 1,400 linear feet from the property line at the corner of 35 to the eastern boundary of their property. So if they accomplish that, that's what's important. They're going to construct an internal local east-west public street, which is going to punch through this parallel and south of Beebe Road with street trees and what have you, some parallel parking. The straight RS portion of it is going to construct a sidewalk parallel to the I-35 service road that matches the 10-foot section constructed by TxDOT north of Beebe Road. So I don't know if you've been on the access road recently. As you go past Beebe Road, there's a super wide sidewalk there. I mean, it's like, how did TxDOT know that we were trying to implement the vibe, right? And the answer is they didn't. But in their project design, they threw that in there. So while it's not part of our vibe trail system, it's a very nice sidewalk. So we're just wanting it to continue south, flanking I-35. Let's see. Construction of the Vibe Trail, about 12 feet wide, and associated improvements, lighting, conduit, landscaping, etc. We do now have a standard detail that we're going to be putting on the website within the next week or so of a proper design for a cross-section of the Vibe Trail as well. Engineering just finished it. The area that the Vibe Trail goes in is about 20 feet wide, to make sure there's plenty of room. It's about 600 feet east-west along the creek they have there, just north of Lowe's. And so they're going to be constructing that portion of it. So there's going to be a vibe spot also associated with the project for the buildings flanking the southern end of the boundaries of the property, to where they've integrated at least 3 golf cart parking stalls, charging stations, approximately 20 standard parking spaces, and an amenity area where people can come off the trail and enjoy maybe a food truck, or maybe there's an outdoor concert venue there, or something to that effect. And now further refinement of what exactly we're looking there can come at the time of site plan, where because some of these are big picture items and some of the refinements are more appropriate at that level. Let's see what else we got here. Commercial uses not including restaurants, 3 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. We also have maximums in our code, so it might end up being 4. So between 3 or 4 is fine, and that's pretty standard. They were looking for a minimum of 1.3 spaces per residential unit on the multifamily. Again, we also have maximums as well, so it may be a little bit higher than that. They're allowed to have golf cart parking within not just the vibe where they have to put at least 3 spaces, but for the entire project. This matches what the code amendment that we're bringing forward tonight is also as well. And just to get just so y'all have an idea why we chose a 20,000 square foot rule, when I was thinking of it, trying to figure out how do we start getting parking ratios established, minimums for the golf cart parking, just to get a baseline standard, I literally was thinking, okay, where in the Target shopping center would be a good start? So I picked the strip center right there on the hard corner where like Jersey Mike's is and all that, and that's approximately 20,000 square feet. So if you had a minimum of 2 parking spaces for that, that seems like a good start. Mind you, we're drafting the code from out of thin air for the vibe. So we're trying to draft something that's never been done before. And so we did that, and then you can have up to a maximum of 20% of whatever you're required to build of your overall parking be replaced by golf cart parking. And that's up to the developer if they want to do that. Although we do encourage something in there like that. Internal sidewalks at least 5 feet wide. And there's an exhibit for Exhibit 2. Security fencing where it's appropriate. Much of the same on the as Mr. Ratterree's project on 7A. The adjacent lane mile fee. This is subject to paying the fee, except if they're widening by BB Road, they can get a credit towards it. And if the cost of widening BB Road exceeds the ALM fee, then they don't pay it. Some restrictions on uses. And let's see, some commercial standards for the what we expect to have on the ground floor. A ceiling height on the ground floor of 12 feet. What else we got here? Just some massing and articulations in the buildings to make it look like more commercial. They do not have to have, they can have ground floor live work units in this document specifically. And so the intent is to create the exterior facade to make it look like there is commercial units there. So that way it encourages more ground floor retail when the market is ready for it. Because this is the first section of a larger major project we're considering in this area. So it may not be quite ready for retail for ground floor in the vertical mixed use. So we are allowing live work units, although we do highly encourage ground floor commercial. Let's see what else. There's the setbacks in there. A lot of the same exceptions from what our MXD zoning district already has. And that's pretty much it. This one's a little bit different than Mr. Ratterree's project, but conceptually it's very similar in terms of what we're expecting, allowing multifamily and vertical mixed use. So, any questions?
Any questions for staff?
I do.
Yes, sir.
Under use restrictions, you have the 1 gas station, 1 convenience store. Can we restrict the building of another car wash there as well?
We can make that as a note. I don't know if the Pocoloco group is here, but I know that's not your guys. But okay. I can make it as a note, as a recommendation, and then if council wants to move with it, that's fine.
I mean, the issue I'm having, and we'll go to discussion, is this is a lot different than the previous one. It's a lot closer to that retail zone. So,
Any other questions for staff?
I have a question about the live work. What's the definition of that? I mean, does that just mean there's going to be residences? Because that's a pretty vague term.
That's fair. That's a fair question. In conversations that we've had at Live Work, there is an example that's constantly brought up and I'm going to probably mispronounce the name of the development. It's either Mueller or Miller, and I don't know the difference because I'm not originally from around here. And, the Miller Airport redevelopment, they have Live Work units. What is it? Mueller? Thank you, sir. The Mueller development has Live Work units where they are designed as commercial on ground floor, but there's usually a second floor sleeping area, but they're designed to be a kind of an in-between spot. So if commercially and from a retail perspective, if the market's not ready for it, people can live in them and they can relatively easily convert them into a commercial use. Usually they're more of sometimes they're more of an office-related commercial, but if they're designed appropriately, they can have stub outs and appropriate utilities for restaurants and all that too. So
I just think it just gets a little bit, that needs to be a little bit clarified because it sounds like really nice in theory, like an art gallery with someone, the artist living upstairs, but it seems like it just goes down the road of just becomes residential. And
I hear you. When we do encourage it, it is hard to figure out a metric to be able to enforce at a certain time frame when they have to become retail. And that's really, it's a really large gray area because it really, like we can put in requirements all we want, but a lot, in the end, the market has to dictate when it comes to when commercial development happens at the same time. So it's a question between flexibility and if we're willing to do that. And staff's okay with the idea, but if you're wanting to look for more clarification, we can look through that too.
okay, thank you.
So what you're saying is it actually could become full residential?
It could be, yes.
Any other questions? Okay, yeah, so since I wasn't able to go over this at a time, just to clarify, you've already mentioned that there is that Live Work units, but unlike the other one, there's no specific this percentage of buildings in the MXD must actually be mixed use. These don't have to be mixed use at all. So in theory, every building will either have commercial or on ground floor, or have at least that kind of potential commercial? Or are we also looking at the interior buildings again, just being purely multifamily?
If you look at the exhibits 1 through 3, the upside down L shape is where the live work units or vertical mixed use is proposed to be. And everything below that, internal to that part, is going to be 100% multifamily.
Okay. So I understand this is, something staff supports, but staff supported the last thing as well that the council didn't. And I'm not sure I see enough difference between what was rejected by the council and what's here in front of us. I mean, if I'm missing something, I understand, like now there will be those live workplaces, which the other one didn't have. So that is a step forward. But is that really the only major difference between what we had before, which was retail in the front, multifamily in the back? This seems very similar with that one difference.
The zoning that came forward before was just pretty much split between, but not evenly, of course, but just retail and then R33. So there was no, a lot of it is how it functions from how close it is to the streetscape and the urban form of it, versus R33, you can just put garden style apartments in and just, it's something we are trying to move past. But I also understand your concern too. Like we do support this. In an ideal world, yeah, everything would be ground floor commercial. But because Mr. Ratterree's project, it was further inside of a existing commercial subdivision, is more built up. There's a lot more connectivity, more walkability in there. It works a lot better from a ground floor commercial perspective than this project right here does at this time. So we want to be able to put in flexibility built into the PUD to where stuff could be converted into ground floor commercial later on as the market changes. So, whereas if we just said, yep, straight multifamily, then it would be exactly the same. So that's the difference.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Chair, could I address you all?
Yes, sir. If there's no objections. All right, yes, sir.
My name is Patrick Reardon, and I am a development manager for Adjournment Group. We're one of 3 entities that have been working on this development with city staff. And I'd like to thank Will and Amber and Scott Sellers as well. They've worked really well with us on this. The very significant difference between the first proposals that were rejected by council and this PUD is the east-west public street that bisects it. And you'll note it goes at kind of an odd angle because we're trying to follow a 21-inch high-pressure natural gas main that's buried through the property that we can't really use and we don't want to cut into. So it follows that for a convenience of the development to maximize what's developable on there rather than trying to cross over that at any point. But that's a main cross street being proposed here that Will had described earlier as a street with trees and parallel parking and a way to get to the next piece of property for the future development there. So that's quite a big difference. And in addition, there are 3 north-south avenues to be built into this. The original proposal was the strip of retail that the property owner and that we bought into. We have a contract for 16 of the acres. There's another developer that has a contract for about 14 that did a proposal, but our proposals were more garden style. I believe the other developer had 4-story buildings. We proposed 3-story walk-up garden styles. And in general, you know them. They're fenced. The parking's all internal on surface, et cetera. But the city came to us and said, we really don't want to accept that as a model for this. We want a more urban model. We want you to push these buildings out to the street. We want an urban streetscape. So now we're proposing 4- and 5-story buildings across the property that are much denser, where we're going to have to, in other ways, find the parking on this, but present streetscape so it's a walkable thing. We see it as street lit, maybe even some of these kind of brownstone stoop thing to the street, but a lot of trees that are being prescribed in this PUD, and then a tie into the vibe at the south end of the property. So from a developmental standpoint, it's pretty radically different, and it is a more expensive proposal. And I did want to answer your question on the live work. Yes, it could be all live early on. The driving factor is the dollars, because for us to rent out the properties as a retail commercial space is a higher per square foot than we can get for simply an apartment. So the drive is always going to be there to bring in retail clients, whether it's an office or an art gallery or a furniture store or another boutique service like a hairdresser or something like that. That's what we would, as owners, want to push our staff for. When we build our properties, we have our own management company in-house as well. And so we bring on our staff and our leasing agents, and we lease these out ourselves and manage them with our own internal staff management. So we would drive live work in that direction. But you're right, until there's a prove out, because we're not on the retail path per se. It's still a wheat field out there. We know it'll come along and it'll be beneficial to the bottom line for the project. But for right now, we really need to have a live work arrangement so we can fill it up. We can't have those units vacant at the bottom. That would be that would be a negative for the development overall. So to build them with the taller ceilings, with storefront glass to make them look commercial is inviting to bring them in, and they're always going to be marketed to the public as a retail space, commercial space.
Just as curiosity, when you have a big storefront and someone's living behind it, how do they make that, You don't have curtains across it or anything.
Yeah, well, you curtain them up. Yeah, no, it's kind of like living in a high rise on the ground floor.
right.
Right. I mean, yeah, that's the easy part.
You can
is
do that, okay.
is to
And
make
that'll
them
be a
look
part
good.
of your job, is to make it
Exactly.
not look like.
Yes.
Okay.
No, we have to make the interior face look good as well as the exterior face in that situation. And frankly, if you could have the opportunity to live in with the big glass and stuff, if you're not too much of a introvert or too private, it actually can be a real wonderful space to live in, as well, as long as it's on the residential side.
And you're talking about 4 and 5 stories?
Yes.
So that you'd have an elevator?
Yes, oh, they'd be elevated buildings. Oh, no, absolutely, yeah. We only do walk-ups on 3-story gardens, though.
Correct.
We're a big apartment developer based in Austin. We're only in Austin now. We used to be in other cities. We've come back to concentrate just really in Hayes, Travis, and Williamson County.
Okay.
And with the last 3 years, we've been the largest apartment developer in this area. So we've done, we're currently working on quite a number of projects, including garden style, including, we call them Gerben, Will, I guess, the urban infill, I call them, to where they're projects with parking garages and 5 stories. And, a lot of it revolves around code and what code allows you to build with certain materials. Wood framing stops at 5 stories, basically. So
I will tell you, there's a market for apartments with an elevator, because I've talked to people who have passed by Kyle, who could live anywhere, because they don't want to carry their groceries up the flight
as
of
I
stairs.
get older, I'm right there with everybody on that.
This is 20s and 30s. This isn't older people.
Oh, no, we understand that
Yeah.
too. So our product is a Class A product. We do all masonry exteriors. We do clay tile roofs. The insides have nice finishes, granite, stainless, the full expectation of a Class A residential unit. And they're getting larger as we develop more and more, in part because of a response to what it costs to lease an apartment. So if you can get a few more square feet and make it a little bigger, it justifies a little bit what people are willing to pay. So, okay. I hope that clarified those couple of issues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're still on staff. Any other questions for staff?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about traffic. Almost, at least once a week, I almost get side swipes from somebody coming off the BB. I don't, again, see anything in here discussing traffic impact out there.
We know that BB Road needs to be improved. We have our transportation master plan that shows what it needs to be improved to. This section of BB Road in front of this project is proposed to be a 3-lane collector for a short distance until it intersects with the future Seton Parkway. That's going to be north-south and crossing over to Seton Hospital. East of that is going to be at least a minor arterial 4-lane, but with the expectation that Seton Parkway going north-south diffuses some of that traffic. And then internal roadways when the surrounding area additionally also develops, whether they're roads or shared access easements for the developments cutting across them. So we have not had a discussion related to the specifics of the intersection of BB Road and IH-35 and what that needs to look like, because that is a text dot conversation, especially when it comes to traffic control. Whether it's something like, it needs to be specifically talked to with text dot, and that is a whole nother scale and level as a project. So for what we could get this locked down as much as possible, that's why we talked about the widening of BB Road specifically, because we know that is, pretty much everybody in this room has been on BB Road, and it's not in great shape. It's a 2-lane road that is barely more than a county level service. I believe there is a yellow stripe down the middle on it, just from a satellite image. I don't know how much it's worn away since the image was taken. So it's not in good condition at all. So, so there's going to be some improvements that have to be made. And that's also why that the road going through the middle of it, east-west, is also being added in there because to help for future connectivity to the project to the east, or the property to the east.
Any other questions for staff?
I have one more, sorry. The whole L of vertical mixed use could potentially be the live work.
It can, as Mr. Rudin had explained, and also myself as well.
So the BB Road part too.
I think there's a little bit more nuance to it, mostly because there's flexibility in being able to put ground floor units in it when the appropriate timing happens from a marketability standpoint. So, yeah.
Okay, that was it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions for staff? Can I have a motion? Okay. I'll go ahead and move to approve item 7B as written.
Just for discussion, I'll second.
Thank you. It has been moved by myself, seconded by Commissioner Chase. Any discussion?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So as opposed to my previous comments, and well, my previous comments stand, I mean, this is on a major section of road. The retailers might not be here yet, but I think they could come through. I am not in support of this.
Any other discussion?
I agree with you.
Okay, so just myself. Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Tajira, I wanted to add or remind, at one point there was a comment made that you all might like to see a limitation to more than one car wash. Would you like to make that recommendation to the city council that it's approved with, sorry, it's approved with that, adding that in as a restricted use?
Yes. Should I rescind my motion and then do a new motion?
That'd be perfect.
Okay, yes. I'm going to rescind my original motion if there's no objections. Okay, I've rescinded it. Now, I will make a motion to approve item 7B as written with the addition to restrict a car wash from the project.
I'll renew my second.
Thank you. Okay, it's been moved by myself, seconded by Commissioner Chase. Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Next, I think we did, I know the previous project from a year ago, the council did reject it. But if it's, my memory is right, we here on our board approved that. And is that correct, Will?
Without going back to look at it, I'll have to say that. But
Right.
yeah, I think you're correct. I believe P&Z did recommend approval of it.
Right, and from what I'm seeing here, again, there absolutely are improvements on this new proposal based on the last one. I'm not sure if that's enough of a change for what the council was wanting, but it is improved from what I can tell. The roads definitely is an improvement. The vibe integration is all, it's something that that I do support. And so I was in favor of the previous one. I'm in favor of this one as well. But I don't know if the council will agree that this is enough of a change, but that's where I stand on it. Any other discussion? Okay, no, that's fine. If there's no other discussion, we will vote. There is a bit of a, it seems we have a few people on different sides of this. So can we do a roll call vote?
Nay.
McCall.
Yay.
Kara.
Aye.
Chase.
Nay.
Okay, motion fails. 2-2. Next. Item number 8, consider and possible action. 8A, consider a request to construct an approximately 160,000 square foot Costco, fuel canopy, and site plan for property located at 18962 IH 35 within the I-35 overlay district. Costco, Conditional Use Permit CUP-21-0042. Mr. Atkinson.
All right. Before you, we have a conditional use permit, as you stated. Excuse me. Will Atkinson, Senior Planner for the record. Before you, we have the conditional use permit for Costco. It's thrown up there on the screen. The front elevation is the top one. It's the side facing I-35. The second one down, elevation number 2, is the north elevation. It's the side facing Home Depot. The west elevation is the elevation number 3, and it's facing the apartments being built between Evo and Home Depot. And the south elevation is the side facing Evo. Right here we have a perspective on the entry of the project. Here's the north side of it. We have I believe that is still the front side of it. Yep, if you're looking in from the southwest. Here's a view of the gas station if you're coming in from the huge, I don't even know how tall it is, monument sign that's up there. If you're coming in right there and you look in to the left, that's the view of the gas station. Their renderings. And that is the view of Costco if you're coming in over by the Sunoco. If you're right up next to it. This one's a little bit different from that perspective, but it's similar. And right here we have the elevations for the fuel canopy. Now, Costco is a project that, with all the surveys that the community has had over several years, that everybody has been wanting for a long, long time. And within the last year, they finally approached us and said, we want to be here. And as part of that project, they have to go get all their permits. They have to get their subdivision. They already got their zoning, but site plan, conditional use permit, building permits, and all that kind of stuff. Y'all, as the Planning and Zoning Commission, have the authority to be flexible when it comes to the I-35 overlay. Now, generally, we hold tight to our standards because we expect them to be the higher end standards. Costco has done that from the east elevation, the side that most people will see. They've done it largely on the north side. The south and the west side are not. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. However, this project has a lot of expectations for it to be moved through. But I want y'all to vote as y'all feel fit, but I also am hoping that y'all will vote in recommending, or actually voting to approve it as it's shown. Now, the reason for that is the facade is not everything. So as part of the agenda item that we have up here on the screen, right here you're looking at the rear of the property. So if you are facing, if you're standing inside the multifamily project and you're facing east to the back of Costco, you can see the dashed line there. It separates what you can see if you're standing on the elevation of the apartments above it. There's about an 8 to 10 foot difference versus what's hidden below it. And the apartment complex also has a lot of landscaping along the buffer as well. I failed to add that into the backup material, and I apologize. But between Costco and the apartment complex, there's actually a lot of buffering. and also a lot of elevation change from a disguising it and kind of shielding it as well. So from the combination of the elevations and also the buffering, the site is largely compliant. It does not meet the exact specifications of the I-35 overlay, but given the scale of the property, the size of the building, and what they've done to buffer it from the residential, staff is okay and recommends the approval of Costco. And we ask that y'all do the same. Do y'all have any questions?
Any questions for staff? Yes, Commissioner Chase.
Just one. Any opposition from those owners of the multifamily?
So the conditional use permit is not a public hearing per se, so we don't notice the surrounding landowners.
Okay. That was it.
Thank you.
Is
Vice
the-
Chair McCall?
Yes, it's the material that's not, from the side that's not being directly visible from the I-35 overlay or corridor. Is that that's not?
The materials aren't quite up to snuff when it comes to the I-35 overlay. We require 90% masonry. That's the biggest thing is the south and the west face of the building. They are asking to put metal paneling on it. But with the buffering behind it, it's fairly well hidden actually on the rear, and also the landscaping that they have. I got another sheet for you real quick. And most of the people there's not going to be a lot of customers on the back side of the building anyway, so it's mostly just for the unloading and loading of their stuff. So, and adequate fire safety routes. So right here is the landscaping elevation shown. They got quite a bit on the site. They've done a lot to protect the view shed, or at least from the front. When it comes to landscaping, when you're coming into the entrance of the shopping center, and then they have a string of trees along the back, along with shrubbery and what have you. And then there's approximately an 8-foot difference in elevation as well. So the combination of all those, if it was just on the same elevation, flat, and not a lot of different design elements from that perspective from the site, I'd have a little bit more heartburn about it. But it doesn't bother me as much as I honestly thought it would initially. So.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Okay, I got a couple. So here on this map that you have on here now, what is that area next to the gas station?
That gray area in the northwest corner?
Correct.
For right now, it is landscaping. There is a potential that they may add future parking depending on demand for Costco. But if they do that, they have to account for parking ratios on the overall site for the shopping center, not just for Costco. So we have to make sure that it doesn't exceed certain parking standards that we have in place for the shopping center.
Okay, so we're afraid there's going to be too much parking if that was actual parking and not landscaping.
I'm not going to say I'm afraid of it. We just have to make sure it's within code.
Because, okay, this Costco is different than like the one in South Austin. The one in South Austin, you've got the Guitar Center and the Target next to it. It's a giant parking lot with multiple places. You got Sam's. South Austin has the same thing. San Marcos has the same thing. This seems to be a Costco with its own dedicated Costco parking lot. And it's not quite sharing a parking lot with Evo or other places. Is that correct?
The parking ratios, how they're calculated, with the exception of Home Depot and Evo, they're actually shared parking with the rest of the shopping center. So it links around the south side of Evo, the frontage on I-35, and the section going up to where QT is, with the apartments have their own. So they actually, it's averaged for the shopping center. So
Okay.
if they want to move forward in the future, we're going to encourage them to keep that as landscaping and just a green area. But if they want to move forward, they have to make sure that it does not exceed our maximum overall parking ratios for the shopping center.
Okay. Because from what I can tell, this place it's going to be packed day one.
Right.
It's not like they're going to grow into it. As Kyle gets
Yeah,
bigger, therefore it'll get more popular.
That's probably, yes.
It's going to be packed. And it's unfortunate that it's not directly next door to a Target type place like the other one is, in that it has that shared parking. Well, I mean, officially it might share the parking, but in practical use, it seems here they have their dedicated parking area. And so, just me personally, I understand that issue, and they have to make sure that
Yeah.
is. I would very much like to see that actually be parking.
Okay.
That is something that I would like to see.
I agree with you. I don't think you can have too much parking for a Costco. I think it's gonna be jammed. And then the overflow even, from the restaurants and everything along there.
Okay, next. Thank you. And then on the south side, you have I don't know what we'd call them, the loading bays or something on the east side, which faces 35.
Correct. And I thought you might ask that question.
And then right next to that on the south side, but pretty much on the east side, that's where like the compactors or dumpsters and things would be, correct?
Yeah,
Just
that's
right
what it's
next to it.
showing there. So the Section 53-899 generally has been interpreted as saying you cannot have loading bays facing public right-of-way and what have you. Or mostly it has to be behind the building. In reality, that's not actually what it says. It just says it has to be shielded from the public right-of-way. So that's what they've done with the landscaping down there. They specifically clustered it to shield it as best as they can in terms of that. So whenever you're coming in. Now, it's going to be from when the landscaping is mature, so there might be some gaps in it as when they plant it, but at maturity, that landscaping should effectively buffer the loading bays. And I did early on I had the conversation with them. I said, hey, this is what the code says, but this is the expectation. But in the end, it is code compliant.
Right. And you showed us that picture,
Yeah.
the rendering but if you're at the gas station that's right there?
Yes.
If you're like standing on the other side of the trees, then you can't see it. But that's not really the question. The question is, can you see it from 35 or not? And I'm not sure. I actually looked at the Costco in South Austin, and their design is pretty similar in that the loading bays are right there on the front of the building as well.
Mm-hmm.
But their design is different in that they're much further back. Here, the trucks will pretty much be level with the building. That's not the same design that the South Austin has. And so I'm glad there's trees right there. Will 6-foot bushes and trees shield that area or not is the question. I don't think so, but I don't know.
A 2-inch, the minimum caliper that we have on a tree is 2 inches at planting. That gets you to 6 or 7 feet in height at the time of planting, and they have to be irrigated so that it'll reduce the chance of it dying. And they also have to be planted at an appropriate time of the year. So if, for example, if they get to the point in their plan or in their development where they're going in, landscaping happens to be in the middle of July, we're probably going to ask them to bond against the landscaping so it can be planted at a later date, more like October, November, that kind of time frame, somewhere they can better handle it. But at maturity, it should adequately buffer the screening from it. So, and you can't really. It's a really bad idea to plant for maturity, and our code reflects that too. It's like you plant it for when it'll best survive. when the city of Kyle first created its landscape code, it was like a minimum of 4-inch caliper trees. Those are massive when it comes to height and all that, but they also are more likely to die whenever you plant them, regardless of the time of year. So I hear you. It's yeah, it can be. We have to account for growth in terms of the landscaping buffer.
Okay, thank you.
So,
ma'am.
again, with the semi-parking, when I'm looking at this, though, it looks like, do they have defined in there what would be the size of a semi on that pad? When you do, I mean, does a semi project out beyond that pad? Does it fit on that pad, or is it back behind the building when it's backed up and loading?
I'm going to be honest, I do not know the length of a semi-truck with a cab.
And I don't know what the size of that pad is either.
I do not know the answer either, offhand.
But,
Okay,
but it's still the 35 side. So, you know, that's the side 35 is on. So even if it is a little bit further back than the wall, which hopefully it is, I would assume it would
Right.
be, it's still right there on the
Right.
35 side.
yeah.
It is recessed a little bit back in there, so it's not. I'm happier that it's not the front face of the building.
Right.
So, and as you're coming south, it'll be mostly hidden from that perspective. So,
I think it's the best place that they can.
What's going to be on that corner?
just if
Across
you're
from-
going southeast directly from that corner, that is where Starbucks is right now.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for staff? Okay. If there's no other questions, can I have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Chase.
go ahead and make a motion to approve the item 8A as presented.
Second?
Thank you. It's been moved by Commissioner Chase, seconded by Commissioner Snydow. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, yeah. I in no way want to be the guy who says no to Costco, because that will not be a popular guy. And with the issues with the apartment complex behind it, I'm not as concerned about that, because no matter what, there's going to be commercial there. You know, if it's Costco, if it's someone, yeah, that's what it's going to be. They're going to see the back of a commercial building. And I think that's fine the way it is. I want to make sure I said my piece about what I was concerned about with the truck and the parking, but other than that, I do support the item.
I hear that, but there's going to also be restaurants all along the I-35 there. So when you're coming down I-35, you're not going to see that bay, because you're going to see a Starbucks and whatever's next to Starbucks and all of that. All of those are going to shield it too, from 35.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion passes. Next, item 8B. Consider a request to construct an approximately 4,000 square foot Torchy's freestanding unit and drive-through, and approximately 10,500 square foot retail number 3 building, and approximately 9,100 square foot retail number 4 building for property located at 19100 IH35 within the I-35 overlay district. Torchy's retail number 3 and retail number 4, conditional use permit, CUP-21-0044. Mr. Atkinson.
Will Atkinson for the record, senior planner. All right, before you, as stated, we have a combined 2 lots for a conditional use permit. We have the Torchy's, which is the freestanding unit on lot 12, as you can see on the screen there. That's the right dashed square. And then on lot 15, we have 2 retail buildings, 3 and 4. Retail buildings 3 and 4 don't quite, they probably have LOIs on them, letters of intent to be filled from a leaseholder, but we don't actually know who's going to be in there yet. So they're moving forward with a design from the shell perspective. Here's a blown up site plan of retail space 3 and 4. You can see the Starbucks over to the right, or the lot for it, and the main drive going in. We got here we go. All right, so you have limestone, a combination of limestone, stucco, and corrugate metal for the front and the north elevation, which is the right elevation. On the south elevation, which is left, we have limestone there, 65%, stucco, 30%, corrugated metal as well. And on the back, we have 100% stucco. And this is for building retail 3. It doesn't quite, similar but different to the Costco, obviously in scale and architectural type, but it doesn't quite meet the requirements for a 90% architectural requirement for masonry. However, the cohesive design of it actually makes it better. We shouldn't be afraid to allow metal paneling if it has a cohesive design. So staff has no problems with retail building number 3 there. It gives a more modern look to it. Here is building number 4, which is going to be paired with it on the same lot. They have a mix of stucco, corrugated metal, and limestone. A little bit different shade of limestone on there. In the back of it as well. And here we got some perspective views of it. So they're going to be combined, and they got a little kind of a shared walkway between them, as it's shown on there. And there you can see that a little bit better. So it kind of has a little gathering area, makes it a little bit nicer.
Are they going to have that same type of metal railing for the pergola type shade?
I don't know that
design?
specifically, but it looks like that's the case. Here's another perspective view of it. Here's what it looks like at night. And then we're getting to lot 13, which on the site plan is restaurant 15, but in this case it's Torchy's. And this to the left is where Starbucks is on restaurant 7 there. So you come in and then you go around the backside and to the right of Starbucks, and then you take another right as you cross the little creek there, labeled Channel A. And this is Torchy's. They actually have a lot more metal and wood siding. But again, the design is what's important and is what should be approved. It is definitely not something we've seen from a design perspective. It's very unique, and it's very architecturally interesting, and they've gone above and beyond. And staff has no qualms about wanting it being approved from a design standpoint. Here's a rendering of it. Here's also the dumpster enclosure. And so that's the elevations. We also have a landscape sheet for building 3 and 4 if y'all want to look at that. It is code compliant. There's nothing wrong with what they're wanting to do there. And they got the pass-through area as well. And then we have the Torchy's landscape sheet. Let me scroll down a bit. Oh, there we go. And it's where you come in from the west side and you get in the parking lot there, and they have a drive-through in there that actually has quite a bit of stacking capability. And so these projects are compliant. They blow the intent out of the water for the I-35 overlay. They don't quite meet the architectural standards, but that's okay. What they're wanting approved is exceptional, in my opinion. So we ask that y'all approve both, or all 3 buildings, actually.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Yes, Commissioner Snyder.
I love it. I love the design. I think it's awesome. So actually, I don't have any questions. I just wanted to say how much I love the design.
Cool. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question about the masonry. Does that not include any other stone? Like, there's limestone on it, right? So shouldn't that be the percentage-wise or whatever?
Yeah, so the way it reads, it gives a few bullet point items, what we should expect from a masonry perspective, whether it's limestone or rock generally, brick, split face CMU, which it's not my preference for CMU, but it works per the code, I guess.
It can look nice.
Right, right. And then it talks about stucco, where it talks about in detail applications only, but it doesn't give a percentage. So we have to, when staff's talking with a developer, we're like, well, generally we consider that like around the windows and the doors. Maybe there's a banding of it or something like that. But it does make it difficult to give them a specific metric. However, on the flip side, when an architect gets absolutely creative, it also gives a lot of flexibility to it, to where if we are, in the end, when I'm done reviewing it and I'm comfortable with bringing this forward to y'all, y'all have the opportunity to say, yeah, we like that, or no, we don't, or make this adjustment. So
Yeah, I like having the guidelines there as like a base, but I think that I agree this is when you're using higher end materials, especially when you get into sort of like branding and you're having specific retail come into this space, like you have to start looking at their materials as well in consideration.
Yep.
So I think it looks great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, I have a question about Torchy's.
Yes.
So, based on the map, facing 35 is the pickup window. The front of the building is facing north, the back of the building that has a Torchy sign also is facing south, but the actual side facing 35 is the pickup window. And while I'm not necessarily against that, because I mean, you're driving south and you see the front of the building. That kind of makes sense. But I couldn't think of another business on 35 that has that same layout. Does any other business do that where the front of the building is not the side facing 35?
I don't think that's typical. I think I'm on the same page as you on that. I can't think of one. I think it's the design constraints of the lot itself with the channel there that forced to the design. So I don't pretend to know the inner workings of a private contract between a developer and a person who's about to purchase property to develop it. However, that's something that they do work out internally. Like if for example, if Torchy's wanted to go there, they would work out exactly where they wanted to go and coordinate with the developer. And Torchy's wouldn't be going there if they didn't want to go there. So,
Right. I mean, it does give the benefit of the actual, the dumpster enclosure is actually at the front of the building because that's where the road is, and that's fine. But the building also, in theory, would then shield it from 35.
yeah.
Which makes it work on the front of the building. It's just, I just wanted for us to realize that this is not usual. Just understand that before you do vote.
I'm wondering if it's because of the drive-through, just giving them a little bit more runway to be able to. I haven't seen a Torchy's with a drive-through personally, so I'm assuming they're giving themselves a little bit more runway. Where if you go to some of the other retailers, it's a very short drive-through area.
Drive-thrus are very tricky. I mean, with the amount of room that you need and just
Yeah.
everything. So I'm sure it was very well considered.
It is a question that comes up a lot whenever we're having what we call pre-development meetings with staff and developers, especially if it's a restaurant with a drive-through. We don't have a minimum stacking metric in the lane. And so it's a fun conversation going back and forth sometimes. We're like, well, yeah, you can do whatever you want technically from a stacking perspective. However, do try to design your project where there's sufficient room so you're not out into the drive aisle or onto the street. I used to work for a company that had issues with that recently, and they were as efficient as they possibly could be when it came to getting people off the street. So I fully understand the question from the drive-through perspective.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily against it. I just want to make sure that we understand that. And yes, based on the lot, this probably layout does make the most sense out of any that they could have done. But what we are then approving to, suggesting to the council to approve would then be the first building like this. I mean, right on 35, turned the other way instead of turned towards 35. So just make sure you know that when we're moving forward. But are there any other questions for staff? Okay, can I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve item 8B as written.
Thank you. It's been moved by Commissioner Snyder.
I second.
It's been seconded by Vice Chair McCall. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed. Motion passes. Next, item 8C. Consider a comprehensive plan amendment to amend approximately 535 acres of land from Farm District to East FM 150 Employment District and 42 acres of land to the regional node for certain parcels located northwest of the intersection of SH 21 and East FM 150, City of Kyle. There is a public hearing on this item. If there's no objections, I'm going to open the public hearing. If there's anyone who would like to speak on this item, you may come up now. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. The public hearing is now closed. Mr. Atkinson.
Will Atkinson, Senior Planner for the record. Before you, we have a comprehensive plan amendment to create the East FM and FM 150 Employment District and amend and expand the regional node land use district in the vicinity of SH 21 and East FM 150, essentially the southeast portion of our city. As y'all pretty much know, but I'll go over it anyway. A comprehensive plan is the foundation of how we develop within our city. It provides a guiding document to show where certain types of development we want to see, and it's a huge factor in how we present our zoning cases whenever they come forward to y'all. And even before we even bring it to y'all in a public setting, we have meetings left and right with developers. Sometimes we have to tell them no because it doesn't meet the comprehensive plan. Sometimes we amend it. Sometimes we create new districts. But it all stems and starts at the comprehensive plan. And it requires 2 public hearings at the Planning and Zoning Commission and then 1 at City Council as well to be heard. So at the last meeting, we had our first one. It was simply a public hearing. There was no action taken, as was appropriate and per our code and charter. And then in this one, this is the first time y'all are going to get a chance to discuss it. So this idea came about amongst staff as a way to, how do I put this? City Council, when I brought forward a comprehensive plan amendment back in October of 21 to ask if they would consider allowing warehouse and construction manufacturing back on I-35 in a conditional manner, not necessarily recommended, but in some places it would be fine. They flat out said no, with one exception. The vote was 6-1 against it. So we have a very clear direction on where they don't want to see large-scale warehousing and construction manufacturing, or light industrial. That's what we call construction manufacturing. Stemming from that conversation internally, the idea was created that we should still allow it in what we might deem an appropriate area of the city. And so discussion started where we're like, okay, where is that? Well, it's certainly not on the west side of the city, up in the hill country and what have you. The terrain doesn't work very well. The very hill country nature of it doesn't work very well. Large-scale industrial users and warehousing, they're looking for flat terrain, dirt that's easy to move and form to what they need from a site development perspective, and stuff that's pretty stable. They need large tracts of land. They need large transportation networks that are already in existence or almost imminent. And the last component is that they need wastewater to some extent. Sometimes the wastewater usage doesn't necessarily match what, if it's like logistics and what have you. So it's not a huge deal. And as we're looking at it from those metrics, this area of the city, which is largely undeveloped down here at this end, kind of matched most of those requirements, and it seemed the best fit from a land use perspective, from an on-the-ground geography aspect. And so we had a discussion about it, and so now we're bringing it forward. There wasn't a lot of staff, there wasn't a lot of pushback from staff. We tried to we tried to make sure that we were okay with the idea of putting this on East F-150 because allowing this will, without question, change the dynamic of how East FM-150 operates and how the feel of it as you're coming into that portion of the city off of Highway 21. But we wanted to so we're very cognizant of that fact that it's going to completely change things. But from an infrastructure standpoint, it mostly works because we still want to be able to employ people and have those industrial users, those manufacturers, the logistics, and what have you as well. So that's why we brought it forward. At the same time, we have an opportunity to amend the regional node to bring it south onto the south side of the intersection. We have a zoning case that's been waiting for some time, and they were waiting on us to move forward, and then there were some delays from council in terms of moving forward with code amendments and what have you. So that's why we brought this forward, to be perfectly honest. And we're looking for a recommendation vote in the affirmative on it. The regional node would be about 42 acres, and the rest of it's about 535 acres with a primary focus on construction, manufacturing, and warehousing. But it will also allow for office institutional, which is our office tower zoning, and also retail services. We didn't want to pigeonhole it from a use perspective. So we wanted to give it a little bit of flexibility. The character area that I drafted and the intent of it also pretty much matches that from what I've just explained. I'll throw the map up on the screen via the ordinance here. Give me 1 second. So that's approximately the area. It's kind of a little bit pixelated there. But that's what it's going to look like in the end. It's going to be a large area. Now, some of it is floodplain, and they'll have to account for that when development happens, if the comprehensive plan is approved. But the area in tan at the intersection is the regional node, and then the area in blue is the 535 acres, approximately. There's little bits of it taken out up in the northwest side of it. There's a church there, a couple houses, and then there's this middle school and elementary school right there as well. And then when it comes to site development permits and stuff like that, there's going to be landscape buffering and what have you as well. So it is a large-scale development type, though. That's pretty much my presentation. I do know we have a protest opposition. It probably needs to be read into the record related to that as well. That's what you have a document up there, and it was provided to us. The biggest thing is they are mentioning that County Line Sud actually has a CCN here on this site, or in this 535 acres. From the documents that I've seen, that's not the case anymore. They had approached the Public Utility Commission to say, yeah, we want to incorporate this area. But in July of last year, the Public Utility Commission reduced that boundary, actually. And I have a document showing that. I probably should have put it in the back of material, but I do have it. So it looks like they're not, this area is pretty much, it doesn't have a CCN. So staff is beginning discussions internally on how to eventually service this from a wastewater perspective. So it's not quite ripe yet from a development standpoint, but we want to have the foundation in place to be able to move off of that and start building on top of that. So, did y'all want to read the opposition into the record at all?
When you say read it,
It's a bit of a book.
What exactly are you?
I don't think that's necessary.
Okay.
though.
Okay.
I think just that you presented it and we can somehow attach it to the record. So
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any questions for staff?
Has there been any other opposition from from the church, from Hayes School, from anything else?
Not that I'm aware of, but this is the only one that we've seen, I believe, right? Okay, yeah.
And
Just
they're
this,
aware?
I'm sorry?
And they are aware?
A comprehensive plan amendment, as it focuses on a large swath of a city, does not require individual landowner notification, but it is published in the newspaper, it is put on the website, so we do make sure that the information does get out there.
And this was farm landscape before that?
Yes.
This is a very beautiful area of Kyle that has a lot of higher needs from the neighborhood perspective. And what is going to go exactly if it becomes industrial in this area?
It's probably going to be those larger scale 100,000, 200,000 square foot buildings that you're seeing over there in the Hayes Commerce Center. That's a good example, or the Majestic property that's catty corner from Evo. Those are the ones that we're seeing an extreme amount of market pressure for right now, in terms of companies wanting to provide facilities for a workforce and employ people.
So for people outside of this area mostly coming in, or?
A combination. People might commute here, but also as residences get built, or people that are living here, they can live here in town and also work within the community as well. We didn't put any focus on residential within the specific blue area, to answer your question there.
Okay.
Well, just to the south of this, though, is that where Waterstone is? Is Waterstone the name of it? The one that's in our ETJ? It's not actually built yet.
A portion of it will be.
Okay.
There's a huge, I'll say a huge floodplain. There's a floodplain that kind of comes in across at an angle along the south corner of the blue right here, that renders a lot of that undevelopable. So maybe not so much from a building massing perspective and scale, but from an actual legitimate geographic buffer, there will be some of that, because they're just flat out not going to build in a floodplain.
Okay, and I have a question about, I don't even know how long ago it was, but our commission made comprehensive plan amendments or changes that were supposed to one day go to council. I want to say that was in 2020, and they never made it. And we went over this area and we had plans for this area. Is there a reason that we're going with this instead of the plans that we made back then that never actually came to fruition?
So I remember there being, I don't remember the exact name for it, but it had more of an employment perspective, like offices, retail, higher density living, that kind of stuff like that down at this end. It had started moving forward. We had all this discussion, and we vetted it, we looked at it and everything like that. I was not party to what was talked about above me at that point, but I do know council ultimately decided they didn't want it to move forward. It was decided that specifically was not moved forward. And I have to be careful. How to move forward from this point. Give me a second.
It's fine. It's kind of a moot point. This is what we have now. We don't have that. It is a bit disappointing to find out this way, because the last I heard, it was still in progress thing, but now we have something instead. But it is a moot point. I guess it's leading to my question, though, about the regional node itself. One thing we had talked about when we were talking about the other changes, we really wanted to capitalize on everything right on 21. And we were talking about kind of like how 35 has elongated node, doing the same thing here. Why is the regional node the way it is in this map?
That is a much easier answer to explain. So on the north side, that little wedge, if you will, you can see the cursor right there, that is where I can't remember the exact name of the company, but it's essentially the JD's Market wanted to come in and do the comprehensive plan amendment. And that's the area they needed from an acreage perspective in the request. And then they wanted the rest of it to be residential related, I believe, if memories, or a new settlement, that's what it was. And that matched the comprehensive plan at that time. That was the most accurate way of putting it forward. And then the stuff to the south, there's someone who owns not the hard corner where the gas station is, but they own the lot just to the south of that. And they've been waiting on an amendment from a regional node perspective to change, because that part was still the farm landscape. So if we were moving forward with this anyway, we had direction internally to do this, then we might as well take advantage of that so they can start moving forward with their zoning as well. So that's what that is. And that matches the 1,500 radial distance-ish, give or take a few feet, I guess, of the regional node requirement. So that's why it has that weird polygon look to it. That's the reason. Now, if y'all want to have an amendment to increase or take, all the frontage along Highway 21 as retail opportunity, that's fine. If you wanted to make it a regional node, I don't think that's a big issue, especially if they're like the pad sites along there. But keep in mind that this, the East FM 150 Employment District also does consider having retail or office already in it, so that you could capitalize along 21 pad sites from a zoning perspective, from a retail perspective. Okay. So I think it's from the perspective of the creation of this district that it still works.
Right, and personally, I'm okay with the change because before, why I pushed so hard for it to be regional node the entire way down, so we didn't have much of Kyle on 21. And the one area we did have, I didn't want a subdivision or something to go right in on our one small area we have of 21. But here it seems like that's not going to happen. Even if it's not regional node, it's still going to be warehouse, manufacturing, something instead. And I kind of like the idea of them having access from 21 instead of having to get access from 150. So I'm okay with that change. I don't know if everyone else is, but just I didn't want with the old plan. That's why I wanted the regional node to be as big as it is.
Yeah.
Here I could go either way.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for staff? Yes, ma'am.
This is just, I thought when I was reading things about our comp plan that we wanted to kind of graduate from in nearby. So I'm seeing heavy industry, which I'm a primary job girl. I've done this for a living, economic development, my whole career. So I see this and I get really excited. Then I look over here at this little subdivision that's already here of houses, and I'm thinking, wow, that's a subdivision that thought they were going to be in a more scaled environment, and then this massive industrial scale very nearby. I don't know, how are we going to kind of integrate this into the landscape that we have and what the future is for this surrounding property, that it's not this heavy industrial and then these residences that are already here.
That's a very good question. And it's a fair question to ask. That subdivision you can see on the screen, that's in the western edge of that's in the farm landscape primarily. It's a subdivision that doesn't have sewer. They're all on acre plus lots. They have septic, which is why that scale is very rural in nature. There could be an opportunity in between once we start processing an idea and actually getting it on the ground in plans for wastewater service to be able to service all this. Then we can also maybe throw in some scaling down of a residential. For example, it might be appropriate to have some higher density multifamily type or similar uses adjacent to the industrial, scaling down to townhomes and then to higher density single family residential and getting down to there. Exactly what sort of distance we need is kind of up in the air to do that, like a linear distance. But the idea is a relatively sound idea from your perspective. So there is not a lot of linear distance between those two. That's certain. So whatever develops between those two, it needs to be done correctly, without a doubt.
And also, I don't know how you can buffer this with landscaping. It's so big.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, I'm like, how big?
yeah.
So, I don't know how you can soften this, because, of course, on my way here, I drive by our own industrial, and I'm thinking, I don't know how you soften that.
They are absolutely different scale, of
Yeah.
course. Architecturally, we're going to, you see examples right there of, they have all sorts of articulations, what have you, so that helps. We don't want just to see a blank wall all the way down. So that'll help to some extent. It'll break up the mass to some extent, but it's still a light industrial building or warehousing. So yeah, I do think it is certainly appropriate to account for a scaling up and down as appropriate from a residential standpoint or buffering, or maybe even to some extent a little bit of commercial related items too. So we can ask the question. If y'all want to make it something official, you're more than welcome to as a recommendation, but we can also ask the question. So
I'm just wondering how you'd be able to do that. I mean, this butts right up against the school,
yeah.
right? There is no buffer. It bumps up. You're not going to be able to do that. There just isn't enough space. And I know I shook my head, and I apologize when you asked for more questions. But again, traffic. Path of least resistance was 150. That's the direct path to this location. 21 is available to get out, but to get in when you're coming south is 150. So I could see that as a concern too.
Any other questions for staff?
Yeah, I think I agree there needs to be a little bit, I think more consideration for what's there and what needs to be there, rather than a bunch of industrial buildings right on this location. But I understand the need for that as well. But it just seems a little bit heavy for right there. But I do like that, the JD Market idea. I like the regional node.
That's really fine. I'm fine with that direction on that.
But I'm not sure I feel 100% comfortable with this at this point.
Okay. Are there any other questions for staff? Okay, there's no other questions. Can I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Chase.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve item
8C.
8C.
Thank you. It's been moved by Commissioner Chase. Is there a second?
Can we we separate the regional node from the other?
Hold on. A motion's been made. We have to either decide to second or not, and then we discuss it afterwards. I will go ahead and second that motion. It's been moved by Commissioner Chase, seconded by myself. Now, is there any discussion? Please.
Can we separate the regional node from the rest of it? Does it have to be one motion?
You can have a friendly amendment, and the person who made the motion can agree to the amendment. What my question is, if you don't mind me asking, is what is your idea behind, or the reasoning behind separating out the region? Oh, you mean from the vote, from creating the district and approving the regional node recommendation?
Exactly.
Okay.
So, are you suggesting approving the regional node, but not approving the?
I don't know, but I'd like to have more discussion on the one. I'm comfortable with the regional node. I'm not comfortable with the other, so I would like the opportunity to vote on one and then maybe make conditions, or I don't know. I'm new, so I'm just kind of.
That's why y'all have
The
a
motion's been
discussion.
made. You can always make a motion to amend. You can motion to move to amend the motion, if you would choose. But that's correct. That would be the next step, correct? If someone wanted to do that.
Yeah.
You could.
And then, if you did that, we would then have a second. If someone seconded it, we would discuss that, and then either yay or nay on that. Then we would
Right.
go back to the original, depending on if we voted for that or not.
Okay, so
Or I
would you
can amend my motion.
would you consider an amendment to your motion that we separate the regional node so there's two votes and two discussions?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. So I'll amend my motion to item 8C, to amend, how do I split this here? Why don't we take them one at a time? Why don't I make a motion on the first one, we have discussion, vote, and then someone can make a,
Okay, so so you would rescind your original motion?
yeah, I'll rescind my original
There's no
motion.
objections to that, you can rescind his original motion? Okay, and then you can go ahead and make your first motion, we can make a second motion after that.
Okay. I'll make a motion to consider amendment to amend approximately the 42 acres of land to the regional node for certain parcels located northwest of the intersection of SH 21 and East FM 150, City of Kyle.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved to approve the 42 acres for the regional node by Commissioner Che, seconded by Commissioner Snyder. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, is there any discussion on that motion?
Can I just say something really quickly?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I think that anything that happens over here, any sort of change really needs to have community input. However, that is possible. I know that they said that they didn't have to inform.
No, they did. There were 2 public hearings, so those opposed or that wanted to provide input had the ability to.
Yeah, but I think that we need to go down there to the church or something and hold like we were going to with the comprehensive plan and all the changes we were going to make, like having charrettes and doing all that online and stuff before we can make. Yeah, that's all.
I agree. I'm actually surprised we didn't see anything from the school specifically, from Hayes.
Yeah, we didn't. We didn't hear back from them. When we do a comprehensive plan amendment, we have to notify all the public entities and what have you. We put it in the newspaper. Actually, I am absolutely making a misstatement there. It goes in the newspaper. If we, unlike a zoning, so if a zoning, we would notify all the public entities and then all the affected landowners. But comprehensive plans, because they are a larger scale in terms of development standpoint, we don't notify every single landowner. Now, while this, from an acreage standpoint, is a large-scale amendment, right? It's not the level of that local node or the regional node down there on the hard corner. From a city-wide perspective, it is acreage-wise, geographically, it is a relatively minor amendment. So from a massing of resources of something that the city honestly does not have at this time, where we'd have to hire hire out a third party to do so with a citywide comprehensive plan, and have to budget for it. It's not appropriate from a resources standpoint to go out there and officially have dialogue with everybody involved. Not that we don't want to, it's just that staff time and resources that are non-existent at this time. It's a relatively minor comprehensive plan amendment. So,
Okay.
well, I understand you guys want to go out there and do that, but from a practical perspective,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, so I'm a bit concerned with where we're going, because if we approve the motion on the floor right now is to approve a regional node at this corner, basically, of 150-21. If we approve that and not the other part, so what we're saying is we want for staff to go to city council and tell them that planning and zoning wants a regional node here, but they do not want anything else to change. They don't want this other change. That's what we're telling them to say. And now, we're in discussion, so I'm just gonna give my personal views. I'm afraid of what's going to happen if we don't do something with this area. Because right now it is considered, it's farm landscape, correct? That's the
Yes, farm landscape with the exception of the remaining acreage on the JD's site.
right. And I don't remember farm acreage, what's recommended, what's not, but a single family subdivision would fall into that parameter, correct?
On septic, yeah, so half acre, 1 acre lots,
Right.
very limited retail, like I think it's neighborhood commercial, which is no more than 1 acre, and it's yeah.
Right.
And farming.
Okay, and so I guess what I'm getting at is that, I mean, we came up with a plan before on what to do in this area, and that seems to have not panned out. This is a new plan. I'm afraid of not having a plan, of leaving it as it is. This is not currently a major area of Kyle, but Kyle is growing, and this is one of our major access points to our city. 21 will continue to grow, and we're going to have, we just like that one subdivision there with the acre lots, we could have more of those in this area. And is that what we want in this area? And so, I am concerned of what it would be like to not have this. What would we have instead is the question. Any other discussion? But again, I'm sorry. This motion is on the regional node, and I am in favor of the regional node. If there's any other discussion on the regional node, I'm sorry.
There was you did have a comment of possibly expanding it all the way down 21.
That is correct.
Is that potential?
There is the potential for that, but again, the 535 acres could already account for that in what's from the expected land use or the expected zoning districts within it. The retail services primarily, office institutional as well. Those are probably, if you look at a site development permit, you're looking at this, making this light industrial, you're probably going to want your offices and if any commercial pad sites from individual small scale ones up lining the road anyway, with the larger scale warehouses and light industrial back behind it. So the blue can already account for that for both flanking 21 and also from the perspective of going up 150 as well. So it's keeping I'm obviously a proponent for the 535 acres. That's without question. But I think it still works appropriately within the context of it adjacent to the regional node.
Okay.
Is there any other discussion on the regional node? The motion for the regional node. Okay, for the motion for the regional node, all those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion passes. Next, did you wish to bring another motion?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and make the second motion. Consider a comprehensive plat amendment to amend approximately 535 acres of land from Farm District to East FM 150 Employment District.
Thank you. It has been moved by Commissioner Chase. Is there a second? I will second. So it's been moved by Commissioner Chase, seconded by myself. Is there any discussion on this motion?
Yes. I'm just going to voice my concerns again of how close it is to the school, potential for traffic out there. I get it. You want something there. Is 1 acre homes on 1 acre lots or half acre lots worse than large industrial buildings? I don't think it is personally. I just don't. You're boxing yourself in here because once you have this industrial zone, you can pretty much wipe out, you can put a nice big circle around that, saying you're not going to have any type of housing, possibly mixed use, so I shouldn't say any type of housing. But, folks aren't going to want to live and own a home right next to something there. This is public hearing. Those individuals that own those lots and those subdivisions have the ability to come and voice their opinions 100%. So I'm not going to be their voice. They have the ability to do that. Just in my position, I look at this and I see a large industrial complex right next to a school, and that gives me some concerns. If the space was there to do what we discussed and be able to push it back and add some residential scaling and maybe some commercial scaling, I just don't see that buffer there. Not where it'll make sense for a developer. I don't see that buffer there.
Do you not see it because you don't think there's room there to amend as a recommendation from a use perspective within the comprehensive plan amendment? Or do you not see it because there's just not room?
Yeah, I just don't see the room. And it still doesn't solve the traffic concerns of having trucks coming down 150. They're going to.
Yeah.
We can't say they're not. We've got to be realistic here. They're going to come down 150.
Right. So
So
traffic,
now you got a whole bunch of trucks driving in front of two schools, a middle school and an elementary school, which I'm assuming that subdivision is where all those kids live, where some of those kids live. Yeah, I just don't see it as a good spot for this type of land use.
Will, do you want to talk to us a little bit about the future of Highway 21 and also the future of the realignment of 150 that maybe could allay some of their concerns?
Yeah. Highway 21 is expected to be widened significantly in the coming future. They're doing a study right now to figure out how to do that. Currently, there's multiple projects up and down between here and Bastrop, mostly between, it's between here and Bastrop, where they've made it into what's called a Super 2, which is where they have every so often they have the third passing lane. It flares out to 3 lanes and it goes back to 2 as a stopgap. But there's a study going on right now as how to effectively widen Highway 21 to expand its capacity as it's already the de facto secondary I-35, right? So there's going to be a lot of capacity going north-south. But then the bypass on 150 coming in from the northwest of town is going to go through essentially flanking the north side of the Blanca River, come down and hit Yarrington Road, and then effectively bypass East FM 150 going south through Yarrington Road and heading down there. So while we can't stop truck traffic on East F and 150, there is a pretty good chance that a lot of it will be rerouted, I think.
And I think also, this is just the comprehensive plan. It's not, we're not zoning it tonight. It's just on a map, right? It's just blue squares on a map. So this could be reconsidered, at a later time. But to Commissioner Guerra's point, I don't know the impact, bless you, of approving the regional node without the employment district node. And so I feel like we're, planning at the dais and without having all of the information and tools that we need to do that. So, I just got here. I'm not really sure, where all of this came from, but I do know that, Will would have vetted this and would have planned for, this to make sense, all factors considered. And so that's why it's being presented to you as is. And so I would just caution approving one without the other, without having all the information.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand you. And to your question earlier, is a warehouse building worse or better than a subdivision? I think it would be. One, the council has said, we've already had the idea of doing something similar off of 35. Maybe south end of 35, but the council does not want that there. So the question is where? Now, to get from 35, it's got to go off of something. And yes, hopefully 21 will become more major as time goes on, but 150 will be, as you said, used for trucks too. I live off of East 150. I understand. I'm also concerned about that. But but again, what I'm more concerned about is us not using this area and just letting it be what it's going to be, letting it stay this farmland landscape when we should be planning for something else. And if we deny this now, and if the council doesn't pass it either, we should come up with a different game plan than as to what to approve here. But I think the most dangerous thing here is just to leave it as it is and to not address it. But if we don't want this, we need to come up with something that we do want.
Is there a potential that we can put a condition on it that it be scaled down towards, on that side, towards the neighborhood, towards the schools?
You can make an amendment to the motion to scale it appropriately. I wouldn't put too many specifics in it. That way it can give us as staff some flexibility in what would be an appropriate scaling type. And then we can bring it to council and get their input as well. Okay. I don't think you're wrong in asking that question. The question is how.
Yeah.
And then we'll bring what's potentially a solution to council, and then they can take their vote as well.
And maybe that doesn't have to be decided in the comprehensive plan. But when we get to the zoning phase, then that's where we could get into the details and kind of figuring that out. So I think, a vague statement about we recognize that it's right up against the school and it's next to a subdivision. We would like appropriate attention paid toward those existing elements, and would hope that we see some nice buffering.
Yeah, I think I could live with that. And I think up against the more high traffic areas, I don't have a problem. I just look at this massive industrial, again, which I'm totally love seeing go up. I love seeing the cranes in the air. But I'm just thinking about this landscape, and it just seems like we're plopping this massive thing there. And there are residential homes nearby that it would suddenly arrive. And I would like it to see it scaled to the area appropriately. So how do we do that? We've made a motion. Do I ask for an amended motion?
That's what I would move to amend the motion if I were you.
I'm not sure, okay. I would like to amend the motion that we accept this, however, that the development be scaled appropriately to the surrounding areas.
Okay?
Is that enough, or is that, okay?
Yeah, and if we have any second thoughts about it, we can come back and watch the recording and
Okay.
listen to the conversation again.
Thank you.
Okay.
There is a motion on the floor. Is there a second? I will second. It's been moved by Commissioner Snyder to amend the motion, seconded by myself. Is there any discussion on the amendment to the motion? I think that's a fair compromise. And I think it's something that should have been in the plan probably to begin with, just an idea of how to make this work with the areas nearby. And I think want to give staff some leniency, but this is just a recommendation to the council. And we're recommending if we recommend to go forward with this, we would like to see proper scaling from what's there in the farm landscape district to what will be here in this new district. So, if there's any discussion, okay. So we're gonna take a vote. What we're gonna vote on now is, do we want to change the original motion to then not only be to approve this, I'm sorry, the original motion will be then to approve this with the scaling. This is just checking, do we want the scaling if the original motion gets passed? Is that good? Mm-hmm. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Nay.
Oh, sorry, all opposed. Thank you. Okay, so it passes 3-1, the amendment to the motion. Now, the original motion has been amended to, the motion is to approve this 535 acres of land from FAR District to East FM 150 Employment District, with now the amending of scaling it based on the original, based on the area that's there. Is there any further discussion on that motion?
I have just a quick question for staff. Are there any users right now looking for this?
We constantly have people applying to the state level doing, I don't remember if they're RFPs or RFIs, thank you. Requesting large land areas, stuff ready to go, and what have you. So we know there's stuff, there's developers wanting to develop. Now, we may not have, at least from planning's perspective, there might be stuff coming down the pipeline in economic development that we're not aware of yet, but planning does not have a specific end user in mind at this time.
So what about the landowners? Have any of them, I mean, you have one landowner that owns 100 acres that is the opposition within what we're now creating, opposing doing this. So I think you got one landowner that's opposed to not only this, but probably isn't going to sell their acreage to for this use. Yeah, are there any landowners that were supportive of this in this area?
We haven't heard from them. This is the only landowner that we've heard from.
Okay, and I think that's something we have to consider. The landowners themselves, well, at least one of the landowners is saying they're opposed to it. I don't know if silence is approval, but at least 1/5 of the owners of this acreage is opposed. So.
Now, the area in blue, the landowner is in favor of this, correct?
With comprehensive plan amendments, we do not notify specific landowners.
property owners.
We do notice it in the newspaper and we notice it online, but because it's a general land plan for the area, we don't, and by law, we're not required to notify these specific landowners. For example, whenever we ask the question about can we put light industrial or construction manufacturing warehouse back along I-35, we had to notice it in the newspaper to bring it to the council to ask the question. But we didn't notify any of the landowners along there. Whenever we did, what were they? Whenever we expanded the land use districts from our ETJ expanded, we didn't notify any of the landowners out on the west side or the northeast side. It's just, we expanded it. And we had the public hearing because we had the public notice in the newspaper. And we noticed it on our website as well.
So 7's A and B under zoning, those would have been public notice. There would have been a
Yes.
sign up on the land that says we're
Specifically.
having a hearing about this rezoning. Since this isn't,
Yep.
technically we're doing an overlay of the land that's saying this is an approved use. And I'm assuming that if a landowner was sell to an end user that wants to change the use, that would have to become then a public hearing, right? That is noticed.
Yes. So the way a comprehensive plan works, like I stated earlier, it's a foundation
Yeah.
that we base all our recommendations off of. Let's say one of them comes in, they want to do a large scale warehouse project. Well, then we look at the comp plan and say, okay, can you do that here? And with this being approved, we'd say, yes, you can. And then we start having the conversation, okay, so you need to change your zoning district to account for that. Because even though we're changing the comprehensive plan, we're not changing the specific zoning on each individual lot. They're still mostly ag, or in some cases, some of these are still in the ETJ because they have non-annexation development agreements with us unless they develop. So there's still a few other steps they have to get to yes in the first place. So this still affords the opportunity to, I'm not going to say condition the process because that potentially could be illegal from the state's perspective, but there's still opportunity for conversations at each subsequent step of the process. Maybe they have to be annexed. Like, okay, so what do we do with that? So they start going through the step-by-step annexation process. Maybe there's something about what they want to do that we find interesting from a development standpoint. We can maybe tweak it a little bit. Then they figure out what the zoning they want. They have to go through the plating process, which means we have to get right-of-way potentially for FM 150, or if there's any other streets on the transportation master plan as well. We have to account for that. We have to account for subsequent related improvements, water, wastewater, road widening. We have to go through the site development permit process where they have the parking ratios, they have the landscaping requirements. We do have a buffering requirement adjacent to residential when it comes to commercial, already built into our code. This is part of the East FM 150 overlay. While we don't specifically have specific requirements for the architectural styles in here, the Planning and Zoning Commission will receive conditional use permits related to it, to where, and staff will have an expectation of negotiating with them to get up to a better standard than the minimum that's built into our code. So there's multiple step-by-step applications that they have to go through to make sure everything's compliant, and they have to do it in the correct manner. This isn't, while there wasn't necessarily an opportunity to discuss this ahead of time from a ground-up planning effort in this specific case, this isn't, we're not just shooting from the hip either. This isn't the wild, wild west. So, but I hear your concerns.
Is there any other discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 3-1. Next, item 8D. Consider an amendment, Chapter 41 Subdivisions of the City of Kyle Code of Ordinances. The following sections will be considered. Section 41-1 Definitions, Municipal Utility Easements. Section 41-137 Streets. Section 41-139 Crosswalks. Section 41-143 Sidewalks. And Section 41-146 Streetlights, for the purpose of adding requirements for the city-wide trail system. There is a public hearing on this item. If there's anyone who would like to speak on this item, you may come now. I will open the public hearing. Public hearing is now open. All right, seeing none, I will close the public hearing. The public hearing is now closed. Mr. Atkinson.
All right, now on to the much more fun stuff. At least I think it's fun. I like doing code amendments. This is the first of two code amendment sections that we're doing tonight that we are asking for a recommendation vote on to facilitate the foundational requirements for the VIBE trail system. Now, the VIBE trail system is a concept that Mr. Sellers brought forward to our city manager, brought forward to the city council back in September, I believe, and they have conceptually agreed wholeheartedly about it. The VIBE is a trail network that we are going to start implementing with that are connected via VIBE spots. The VIBE trail itself is a 12-foot wide shared use path that's concrete. It's going to have decorative lighting along it. It's going to occasionally have a charging port. You can take a golf cart on it. You can hike and bike on it. You can walk your dog. You cannot take ATVs on it, but we want it to be safe. And it's going to span across the city. Some of it's going to be built by the city ourselves with funds, but a large portion of it, most of it is going to be constructed by developers as their particular, parcels develop. They have to develop their portion. And to do so, we have to amend our code to allow for it. So here we are. I had a staff memo, but I'm just going to go through the code amendments that I have. As part of this, we have to find the code sections that don't necessarily jive and take care of them. The first one may not necessarily seem related to the definitions of amending the VIBE, but in our discussions with creating the VIBE, we realized that we didn't have a definition of what a municipal utility easement is. We know what it is from a practical perspective. It's our version of a public utility easement, except that it's owned by the city specifically. So we got rid of PUEs and made them into MUEs. But around the perimeter of a property, you have front, side, and rear one, and utilities have to get our permission to go in there. I've created the definition for what was already being done from a practical level, and I've also added on there on a case-by-case basis, an MUE may also be a public access easement. That way, we have the opportunity to be able to, if we need a utility easement for like a wastewater line, we can also make it into an access easement as well at the same time. It's as simple as that. And there might be times where, like for example, the main trunk line, wastewater line that serves the city of Kyle goes along Plum Creek, along the east side of Kyle, and it also parallels the main trunk line of the trail system, which the VIBE is going to be transformed into. So I just wanted to be able to catch that just in case. 41-137A subsection 1 I want to create. For the most part, this is going to be an off-street trail system, but there are areas in the city undoubtedly where there's not enough space to create two alternate transportation systems. So where it's appropriate, we can allow them to share the same space. But I just wanted to make clarifications in there to where all efforts should be made to have a separate lane for the golf carts and shared use path. Speed limit can't be more than 35 miles an hour, and there needs to be appropriate striping, stenciling, or signs. Whatever is appropriate from a traffic manual perspective to make it as safe as possible. I didn't want it to just be, let's just make this happen. I want to make it safe as possible. Okay.
I'll ask a question at the end.
Sure. In K1, adding the standard category for a pedestrian path for the VIBE, it's supposed to be a minimum of 12 feet wide and a right-of-way width of 20 feet. And where we can't, for whatever reason, get right-of-way, I wanted to be able to have flexibility to have an easement instead. 41-139 is relating to crosswalks. Most of the time, it should be designed to where they are grade separated, where the VIBE intersects with a public street. If they do that, then it needs to be a minimum of a 12 by 10 concrete box culvert with appropriate lighting underneath. Where it's at grade crossings, they need to have a hawk signal to notify drivers coming down the street. Section 41-143. This one is a fun one to amend and also add to. We generally work with developers to make sure that they add sidewalks along the perimeter of their developments, along existing streets where they're tying into, but the code specifically does not require them to. And so it makes it a little bit difficult to try to bluff your way through that sometimes. But we generally have a pretty good working relationship with the developers, so we can get them to put the sidewalk in anyway. So it's not a huge issue, but I just wanted to make it black and white. So they gotta put it in there. Widening it to 5 feet, standard minimum sidewalk widths. 4 feet is fine, except every 200 linear feet, you have to have a 4x5 bump out for ADA compliance. So from a just forming it up perspective, when you're creating the sidewalk and making it uniform, 5 feet's just better from that perspective. Let's see, allowed to be designed to have appropriate spacing for street trees between the sidewalk and back of curb. We've been implementing that with the residential style guide, but we haven't actually had anything in writing. We just said you need to design it. And so it needs to be a little bit more firmed up on that. A little bit wording where it can't be in the right of way, then they can go in as a dedicated easement. So it also talks about project as a portion of the Vibe Trail system. It needs to mostly be related in parks, floodplain, drainage areas. It will replace a 5-foot sidewalk if it's adjacent to the street. That way we don't require them inadvertently to do a 5-foot and a 12-foot section. It won't happen, but we just want to make sure we're clear. And then it references back to 41-137A. And the last one in here is for streetlights. There is I should have referenced subsection E specifically in here, but in our existing land or lighting code for subdivisions, it talks about in subsection E what the standard detail for a decorative light is. There's a specific brand and model and everything. So the decorative lighting relates back to that, and it needs to match what the rest of the city is supposed to have when it comes to decorative lighting poles. So that's what that is. That's the subdivision side, and that's going to be our foundation to start on that side. Inevitably, there's going to have to be tweaks later on down the road when we start seeing something that doesn't quite work as well as we want, but this will get us started. Any questions?
I was going to ask you what subsection E was.
Yeah, it's not actually online yet. We passed the ordinance to amend our lighting code, but Muni code only updates twice a year per our contract, so it's not even online yet. It's there, but you have to go and look for it internally.
It's probably the one we already approved, right?
Yeah, the one back in May or
Right.
whenever. Yeah,
Dark
yeah,
sky,
yeah.
yeah.
So,
Thank you. Are there any other questions for staff?
I had a question, but you answered it a little bit lower down.
Okay.
My main concern was just the crossings with 35 miles an hour and golf carts, bicycles, and people.
Yeah.
People is a little easier. Golf carts and bikes, not so much. But as long as there's some type of warning system for them crossing, then it's fine.
Okay.
I don't see an issue with that.
General question, because I don't know. The golf parking spaces is great, and where I came from, the grocery store actually had golf parking spaces. And, but can golf carts park in regular parking spaces too? Is that legal?
I don't think there'd be anything against it. It's the question of how do you get to it in a legal manner
Right.
for driving there. So we won't need to be able to implement it from a code perspective that you're safely getting there. Now, there are some, I did try to, whenever I'm amending code, I try to look at it from both the city standpoint and if I were a developer or a private entity working to develop a project. If I were a developer and the city was encouraging me to, and this is going to be the next part from the zoning perspective, but if I was a developer and they were trying to encourage me to put in parking spaces for golf carts, I would want them reduced down from a space saving perspective, from a cost perspective, and making an area more usable from a building perspective, from a rent generation standpoint. So they would need to be adjusted accordingly in that way. And we can discuss that more in the zoning side.
No, I was just thinking if the golf cart spaces were full, you can pull into the next one, right?
Yeah. It doesn't specifically state that, but I gotta be careful. I don't anticipate anybody trying to enforce that.
You're not going to get towed, right?
I don't think so. No, I'm not
Unless they have four-wheel drive, then that golf cart's going to get towed.
So, and maybe that's something that we can account for in the code too. That's a good question. So, but any questions about the subdivision side?
Generally speaking, when you roll up to the crosswalks, I read that and it said that crosswalks were the purview of planning and zoning. So I would love to see those textured crosswalks go into our new subdivision plans.
From like a speed bump, not a speed, it's a speed
Not a
table.
speed textured, well, speed tables are
Oh,
for the bigger ones, but I'm talking
Okay.
about even the
Kinda like we have
like
it-
you have out
okay.
here. Why shouldn't we have the developer doing that at every mailbox, at every playground, at every main access way for children or walking to school or anywhere else? It's a natural traffic calming device. It does not impede emergency vehicles. And I would just like to see, just like we're encouraging traffic circles, that we encourage those crosswalks be textured by the developers. So the city doesn't get all the calls for, we want speed bumps in our neighborhood.
Okay. I'm trying to think if it's a question of scaling it up in the code or just simply inserting it in the code. Like, do we want to specifically, and I don't know the answer. So is it specifically, should they just be there to clarify where the vibe crosses the street? Or should it be actually all the way across from a safety perspective?
I'd like it in all our subdivisions
That
personally.
seems great from at least at a glance.
I'd love it in every subdivision we had, every amenity center, playground. Why wouldn't we have that?
You just need to get a standard detail on what I think those are stamped concrete out there. So
They
we'd have
are.
to figure that out, but okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Now, that may require, I think that's going to require well, nobody's made a motion yet, so,
Topic.
yeah,
Agenda.
yeah. Well, so, well, it's under crosswalks, and I didn't specifically, when I noticed it, I only just said for the specific section, so I think it's okay from a public notice standpoint.
I was just getting worried when we were talking about subdivisions in general
Hmm.
and making that change. We didn't adequately notice the public that we were gonna have that conversation, so just wanna make sure we're sticking to the vibe.
Right.
That's fair. Okay. We may have to bring it back, but we'll take a look at it.
That's fine, but I would appreciate doing that. Remember, we talked about it. That's what Austin is doing now
Yeah.
in all their subdivisions.
Okay. We'll take a look at it. That's not to make the motion to include it yet, though, but, okay.
Are there any other questions for staff on this item? If there's not, could I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Chase.
I would like to make a motion to approve item 8D as presented.
Thank you. It's been moved by Commissioner Chase. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you. It's been seconded by Commissioner Sydow. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you all thank you for staff for work on that one. Now we'll go to item 8E. Consider an amendment to Chapter 53 zoning of the City of Kyle Code of Ordinances. The following sections will be considered. Section 53-33N, 4, parking. Section 53-892, district and boundaries. Adding Section 53-900 and amending Exhibit A, Plum Creek Planned Unit Development, Article 2, Section 1, for the purpose of adding requirements for the city-wide trail system. There is a public hearing on this item. If there's anyone who would like to speak on this item, I will open the public hearing now. The public hearing is now opened. You may come up to the podium. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Public hearing is now closed. Mr. Atkinson.
All right, so this one's a little bit more nuanced because it's zoning versus subdivision, but it's still important. So this is the second half of amending our code for the vibe, but from a zoning perspective. So when we started accounting for the idea of allowing golf carts and integrating golf carts into parking ratios and standards related to vibe spots and and everything. It just made sense to account for that in this perspective. So we're doing it from both inside the Plum Creek PUD and outside the Plum Creek PUD from the development standards. They should be allowed in golf cart parking by right should be allowed in all all districts except for single family duplex zoning to encourage the use of the Vibe Trail network. Minimum dimensions will be 4 feet wide and 6 feet deep. We started researching in how big a golf cart is. So it doesn't really need to be much bigger than a golf cart to make it work. They're pretty small vehicles. A developer does not have to install golf cart parking. We highly encourage it, but it's not required. But if they do, golf cart charging stations are required because most of them are electric vehicles. And with a minimum of 2 charging stations for the first 20,000 square feet of a building. Now, as I alluded to in a different agenda item, when we started figuring out what is the minimum required parking ratio for golf cart parking spots, how do we even figure that out? From a historical perspective, when we started trying to design the Vibe system, a lot of what we pulled from was from Peachtree, Georgia. They're a golf cart community. They're around a golf course, so it makes sense. But they allow them at their schools and what have you, And I called them. I said, "Hey, how did you figure out your parking ratios for golf carts?" And they immediately said, "We don't have one." So it's been a kind of off-the-cuff kind of design for them, and they just kind of allow it. But we wanted to have something more specific. And so I was racking my brain how to figure this out. So I just said, okay, so let me just do an image search, a Google image search of, development patterns around town. If I was going to go into a 20,000 square foot building, and I picked the one there at the hard corner, 16, 26, and 35, right there in Target, where Mod Pizza is and all that. And I said, how many would be, just at a glance, would be the minimum required that would make sense if I were to do this as a practitioner of a zoning code or if I was a developer. And if I wanted to put in there and I didn't know what the demand was going to be for future parking for golf carts, what's the minimum I could do to get by and spend a little bit of money but not go overboard on it. And it's probably 2 for the initial 20,000 square feet. That seems appropriate. Mind you, this is coming from something that's never been designed before. We haven't found any other examples yet. So that seems appropriate, and that's what I went with. And it just seems to just generically make sense in this perspective. Now, that is your minimum threshold to start if you want to put in parking for golf carts. You're allowed to have a maximum of 20% of your required parking outside of golf cart parking ratios to replace with golf cart parking at a 2-to-1 ratio. So, for example, if you're required to have 100 parking spaces, regardless of golf cart parking, you could get up to 20 of those replaced with 40 parking spaces for golf carts because they're smaller. You can fit 2 golf carts in one standard parking space in the city of Kyle. It's 18.5 by 9. So it just makes sense. That's what we put in. Maybe that's a little high. I don't know. We won't know until y'all make a recommendation vote and what council thinks. Again, we're creating this kind of out of thin air from a parking ratio standpoint.
Does that mean then, out of that 100, they only have to have 60 regular parking spaces?
Yes. Well, excuse me. No, I guess it would be, You replace,
20 regular parking spaces become 40 golf carts.
and then,
So that means there would be 80 regular and 40 golf cart.
So you by default actually increased it.
So more people can park there, I guess, but so you keep 80%,
Yeah.
and then 20% could be.
Okay, so they would still have to provide the 80 parking spaces?
Yes.
They couldn't say, oh, we got 40 here, so we only need to provide,
60.
we can
there.
provide fewer spaces.
And they're still providing the 100.
Okay.
They could have 100 cars parked there conceivably.
Another quick question on this.
Sure.
When there's electric plug-ins, what's to keep a Tesla from pulling in and parking?
I'll be honest, I don't know if a Tesla
tiny.
using, what's that?
They're tiny
What, Teslas?
size, yeah.
Oh, they're charging stations?
No, the vehicle is quite tiny. It would fit
Oh,
in
yeah,
the
they-
4x.
Oh, wow.
It's a different
regular
plug.
110.
Different plug-in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, so I don't know if, do Teslas use 110?
I don't think so.
Yeah. What's that?
No.
Never mind. Bad question.
Oh,
So,
that was a good question.
So
It is.
the Teslas are around, typically the plugins for, I mean, I'm unfortunately advertising my community here, are typically like square. Some of them are just regular, you know, you can plug in like an extension cord to get it
Yeah.
charged.
It's just
So,
a regular 110
yeah.
plug-in.
for a golf cart? Yeah. So, because I don't know all those details, I don't own a golf cart. I was just relying on the market to dictate the appropriate charging station because I don't want to get that wrong in our code. So, it's the same thing in the Plum Creek PUD. I just found the appropriate spot over there too. Good. I didn't want to leave them out. Relating to 53-892, we already have where we've established overlays. The vibe spot is effectively an overlay, the way it's being drafted, and we're bringing it forward. It is a way to, you still have to go through a public hearing process to get your plans approved for the vibe from a zoning perspective, but it allows for a lot of flexibility for an appropriately designed project, as each vibe node is supposed to be a unique idea. So as part of that, I chose to try to amend 53-892 to incorporate the vibe as overlay number 8. But also, before we get to that point, there's the opportunity to change subsection 4 to Veterans Drive from Rebel. We changed the name last year, I believe, or a year and a half ago, and this code amendment needed to account for that as well. But this just throws it in there. A question that Commissioner Snydell had, she had called earlier about where's the reference to map in subsection B. We don't really have it. It was being drafted when I was on the long range planning committee for the city of Kyle. And at about 2 or 3 months into that, council disbanded the committee. So it never really made its way forward. It's on a to-do list to create the map and incorporate it. But it's also a comprehensive plan document too. So we have to be careful about how we integrate that into the zoning code. So that specifically is not in there for that reason. All right, then we get down to the really big picture item, creating section 53-900. It's a placeholder right now in Muni code called the Vibe. Now I'll say this, the Vibe has been a working title for this idea. It's something that we've been using as a marketing tool and what have you. If council decides they don't like the idea of the name, they're more than welcome to change it, but we have it on here because that's just been the working title and the marketing for it, and we honestly have not come up with a better name, so it seems to work. It's trail-oriented development. This document drafted is something Mr. Sellers put together, our city manager. So I took what he had, I didn't want to recreate the wheel, and I plunked it down into our zoning code with a couple minor amendments, not substantive, but just little things to make it function better. Mostly focusing on the last page where it comes to how you get a vibe spot approved. Now, this process, or the idea behind it, is extremely flexible and very radical in terms of a zoning code. Traditionally, zoning codes are more restrictive than flexible. And so we wanted to come up with a way to incorporate great design, but also stay compliant with public hearing processes and state code and not violate that from a zoning perspective. So it can go 2 routes. You can go through a PUD, which we've already seen 2 of those tonight, incorporating the vibe. And that's probably going to be the most common route that you can take it through as a unified development plan, incorporating the vibe spot into. Or it can go as a standalone project, Maybe for whatever reason, the vibe spot that we think is going to be there is just large enough for its own lot for whatever reason. And it just needs to be part of that. So we wanted to provide an alternate route to go through a conditional use permit process. And that'll be fleshed out with discussions with the developer, which way is more important. Either way you look at it, though, we wanted to give a lot of latitude to discussion on how to incorporate that and give staff, the developer, plenty of room for conversation and flexibility and creativity to make these great places. They're going to be scattered throughout the city, but they're key. The creation of the vibe idea conceptually is already turning development on its head from what it was prior to this idea. We're already seeing it. Developers are wanting to be incorporated into this. It's hard to get developers to want to do anything other than their standard stuff. So the private market, the private sector is excited about this. We've seen it left and right, and we're excited to push it forward. So that's why I've created it in this manner, where there's a lot of latitude on how things can be developed, even if it normally may seem a little bit out of sorts adjacent to a certain land use type. They do need to be integrated appropriately from separate land use types, and we can account for that in the process as well. So it's exciting. It's just flat out exciting. I'm happy to bring this to y'all. I'm massively a proponent for this, and I can't wait for stuff to start coming down the pipeline. It already has, but like really on the ground construction from both the development side, from the cities doing its side. I'm not a project manager on the city side, but we have funding that was passed in a bond project last year. This can be used to start working on creating the vibe trail system for the parts that we need. It's coming, and it's coming very quickly. It's coming quickly even from the city side of things, from our construction. And the cities don't move fast from a government standpoint. So it's really exciting. I can't rave about it enough. So do y'all have any questions? You probably do. But.
Are there any questions for staff? Okay, you were saying that we could change the that we could change the maximum golf cart spot number if we decided to with our recommendation.
Yeah, you can definitely recommend a change. We just kind of threw a percentage in there. There wasn't a real rhyme or reason to it. We just thought, hey, maybe we didn't want to go overboard, but we also didn't want to be too little.
No, I understand. I'm just thinking, unless it's a golf cart store, what residents will think of when they see a place come in with that ratio, the 80 actual lots, actual spots for the motor vehicle spots, and then they have the 40, which would have been 20, and then see what the residents would think of that. And I think that ratio is extreme. I don't think anyone's actually going to take you up on it, but I would still, I still think that's high.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the right number would be though. So I think it should be part of the motion when we make the motion, but
I need to make room in my garage for a golf cart.
I do have a question.
yes.
So I noticed rear load is the preferred
Yes.
on this. I know it says not limited to, but I specifically see single family detached is not on that preferred list.
From a parking ratio perspective, right? But from a
So here's my conundrum, just so that you understand why I'm saying what I'm saying. I've built golf cart communities. I know golf cart communities. Our condo people don't have golf carts. they have nowhere to store it. If they have a garage, it's normally just big enough to fit their car, maybe two. These are retired folks too, so mostly it's just one car, and they might be able to get the golf cart in there. You might be biting yourself there just because of the size of, you and I know, garages are small. So are they going to prioritize a vehicle being parked on the street instead of having their vehicle secured in their garage and want a golf cart? I love the idea. I build them, so I love them. They work great. And my recommendation is going to be 5%, by the way, on that. But I just feel like we're limiting it.
From the parking ratio standpoint?
No, just the what we're looking at for what type of development to be on this
In
site.
the Vibe node.
Yeah.
So the Vibe node generally, and it doesn't, each one can be pretty flexible, but generally should be higher density nodal type development. So when you're looking at that, we're looking for stuff that has less curb cuts from a front loaded perspective. That's why we put it in there. It did not integrate necessarily, like you're stating, with how you park a golf cart, or where you do it with a single family residence.
Yeah. You don't have a driveway, right, in a townhome. Most I should say, and we've had that discussion many times here when those projects have come up. So that's why I'm saying either you're parking on the street, you're parking your vehicle on the street so that you can have a golf cart in the garage. Again, I like the idea. It's just, we have to think about, well, where are these carts gonna park? Same thing with a multi-family. If I'm renting an apartment, I'm probably not buying a golf cart.
Right, and they may not choose to even incorporate golf cart parking, and that's fine. They don't have to.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for staff? Okay. Were you saying 5 for the maximum?
Yeah.
I'm afraid if it's a small lot and they only have 20 spaces, then that's one space. I would like to give more, okay. I guess we should do some discussion though. The question is, someone has to make a motion first, and then we can discuss it.
I'll make a motion for item 8E, consideration.
You can just say 80.
Yeah, there you go. However, to change the maximum golf cart parking allowance to 5%.
Thank you. There has been a motion made by Commissioner Chase. Is there a second?
Second.
Been seconded by Commissioner Snyder. Is there any discussion?
I agree with you. If can you do a minimum? Can you do 5% then with a minimum of so many?
Well, if you do a minimum, then you're saying everyone who builds parking lots has to have golf cart parking, which is I don't think what we want to do at this time.
We want to encourage it.
Because especially on the Vibe, we want to have it. And I'm sorry, were you still going? You have the floor. Okay. So yeah, my concern, yes, if we had that 100 spot lot, 5% is a good number. I think, 10 spaces for golf carts, that makes sense. But when we're maxing it out at 5%, if there's only 20, 25 spots, that is a small number for someone that really may want to buy into, they want that to be, they're right off the Vibe. They want the golf cart people to come. I would like to see more leniency there. I don't know what the good number is. I think 20 is high. I think 5 is low, but I don't know.
I think you have to do economies of scale, right? So 10% is a big number. As you start increasing those parking spaces, 10% becomes a bigger and bigger number.
Right.
I was thinking of it more on that larger scale. Driving around the community, I don't know how many retail locations only have like 20 parking spaces. So that's maybe where I was coming from, of limiting those to 5%. Maybe we can change it to, if your maximum parking lot is 25 spaces, your number's 10%, and anything above 25 or whatever. I'm just throwing 25 as an arbitrary number. Anything above such and such, maximum is 5%. Because again, you have 500 parking spaces, and like the Costco area, that whole area is considered one parking area, right? The Costco, the Evo, not the apartments. The apartments is
Right.
outside
All
of
the-
that.
all the
But
ancillary
all of that
concepts.
is one. 10% of that is a lot of
Okay,
golf
so
cart parking.
how about, I'm just shooting from the hip here. Like if we went back to the original 20% with a maximum of blank number of spaces. So you can have 20% of your lot, but you can't have more than blank spaces, 20 spaces, convert to 40 spaces, or whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
That might be a good way to solve this issue. Because I still think if a resident sees a parking lot come in with 40 golf cart spots, they'll be like, what is the city doing? But I also want for us to have that answer. So, that might be a way to solve this.
Well, it may not be actually, can I even discuss right now while you have a motion in play?
No, well, I'm discussing the motion.
Okay.
I'm saying what I'm concerned about with the motion that was made. Yes.
Thank you. I'm just trying to think from administering that. So you're saying a maximum of 20%, but no more for larger scale projects than 40, as an idea, not the actual specific code, but no more than 30 or 40 parking spaces, and it scales down from the level from the economy of scale.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you could do a no more than X instead of having to say, you don't have to discriminate on the project itself. It's just a maximum of 20% up to
An actual
25 parking spaces maximum.
Absolutely. And that'll let the smaller lots have their 20% if they want it. And it'll keep Costco from having, 100.
Yeah. I don't,
If you're going to in your golf cart to Costco to buy a can of soda,
Exactly.
yeah.
yeah, I get that.
You're probably taking your SUV to Costco to get all your stuff, right?
So, but the reason we're discussing this, because I think an amendment to the motion should be made. The question is, what should the amendment be? And I'm thinking we found a pretty good balance there. Do we agree that, with the we gotta say a number of vehicle spaces that could be transitioned to double? Yes.
Do we want to say maximum of standard vehicle spaces or maximum of golf cart spaces?
I was
I
thinking
think
golf cart.
Yeah.
Okay,
Spaces.
That's what I'm thinking.
That's fine.
Because I want to
It's-
avoid the example you gave of 40,
Yes.
right? Someone pulling in and seeing 40 golf,
Yeah.
because they're all going to be in the front too. You're not going to put the golf cart parking all the way in the back. You're going to put it up
Right.
front for utilities.
Just make sure it's an even number.
Yeah,
If you're
that's
gonna do
why
golf
25 might not work. So 26,
23 and a half? No.
23 and 2/3.
yeah.
There you go.
Okay. I like the idea
So,
conceptually.
do you all have any thought as to, okay.
So I can amend my motion then.
Yes.
So I will amend the motion to 8E for standard language and to amend. Oh, it's not up here on the screen. Sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
1 second. I think that's what you're probably looking for generally, the wording there.
Yeah. To amend the provision regarding golf cart parking to allow replace standard parking spaces at a 2-to-1 ratio, maximum of 20% of required parking, or not to exceed 26 golf cart spaces.
So you're still good at the 20% and not to exceed 26 parking spaces.
Yeah, that's 13 spaces.
I don't, in the end, I don't care what the number is. I just want to make sure we're
Yeah.
Yes, yes, that is what he said.
26 golf cart
Okay.
spaces. Okay.
I will second the motion. It has been moved by Commissioner Shea, seconded by myself. Is there any discussion on that motion? I think we've come up with a middle ground here. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed. Motion passes. Next, item number 9, staff report. 9A, staff report by William Atkinson, city planner, senior planner.
Mr. Chair, we're missing the section where we usually add something, and I have 2 items I want to bring up.
With that not on the agenda, can we?
Well, typically, we don't see that P&Z adds things to the agenda. But if you want to email those in to us, we can add it to the next agenda.
Okay.
We'll do that.
Well, they're just items that I'd like for consideration in the future. They're not even for us. There's something I wanted to, that, maybe we could just bring them up as they come up in topic, like we did with the sidewalks. You know,
If you want to email those to me, and then let's just have a conversation about what you would like to do, and then however that turns out, we might send that to council to see if they're interested in directing P&Z to work on some of those issues. Sound good?
Are we gonna just take out that section that she's talking about, the items that we present for consideration, or we talk about? Isn't there an items for discussion or items
For future.
for future,
Discussion.
yeah, discussion?
If that's something y'all would like to add back in, we certainly can.
I would like to add
Okay.
that back in.
You got it.
Because sometimes it's not necessary to become an actual item, but it's something that we want to bring forward to our fellow commissioners and see if it should be something to
Okay.
discuss.
You got it.
Thank you. Staff report?
Yep. So we got a few items. The first one, the most immediate concern is we have a couple of plats that didn't quite make it to this meeting, but from the developer's side, it's imminent that they get approved, and we wanted to see if y'all were available next Wednesday night to approve like 2 plats, I think.
One of them is Calterra.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah. So there would be 3 of y'all.
And
Brandon is
we'd have to have
out.
Brandon here, and we'd have to have all 3 of us. I mean,
Ooh.
I'm available just, that,
I'm okay with it, but it's
We're-
tricky without a full dive.
We're no longer in that deal closed, so I don't know if the conflict continues after that. But I'm no longer in active negotiations or business with them. Our deal closed, contract closed, money exchange hands, done. So y'all let
Is
me
it-
know. I'm available, but if you need to go back and check on that, let me know.
We can ask Paige, but to me, it doesn't sound like you're conflicted
Yeah.
anymore. And I guess that's also a call that you need to make if you feel like you're conflicted, but if you don't, then it doesn't, you should be
No,
fine.
I don't. But I would like to have council's opinion on it,
Okay.
just to make sure I'm in the clear.
Okay,
Okay. So that's what we're looking at for next Tuesday, next Wednesday, which means the agenda is going to be posted Friday. Yeah. So this Friday. So we'll find that out pretty quick, at least from your perspective, Matt. But is anybody else available or not available this coming Wednesday for literally probably 2 plats? Or not tomorrow, but next week? Okay. Thank you. We have not been ignoring the fact that we only have 5 commissioners. Council is working on a new policy. They have, was it a task force is the appropriate phrasing? Yeah. They have a task force they're working on a new policy they believe is about to be imminent within the next couple of weeks. And so following that, we'll be starting to process applicants, if assuming their timeline is accurate. But that's the reason why we haven't brought anything forward related to new applicants and new commissioners and related stuff. So we tried to convince them otherwise at the last council meeting, or 2 council meetings ago. But they voted to wrap up their new policy. So that's where we're at on that. Trying to think, is there anything else?
We are performing final interviews
Oh,
for
yeah.
the Director of Planning this week. So we'll get those wrapped up and hopefully we'll be offering a job by the end of the week. Our hope is to have them in place by early February, late January. And then we also have advertised for our planner position. So hopefully we'll get that filled and we'll have a fully staffed planning department. And then as soon as the planning director is hired, he or she is going to hit the road with starting off on our comprehensive plan.
Oh, well, I have a question. So the meeting on Wednesday next week, would that replace, so there wouldn't be a second like the 4th Tuesday meeting?
I don't believe we have anything that we're working on that's going to trigger a 4th Tuesday meeting. February might be a little bit different. We might have 2 voting meetings, just depending on, there's an annexation that's going to fall on the 4th Tuesday. But that's a couple weeks down the road. So,
Thank you. Anything else?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Item number 10, adjournment. Can I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner
make a
Jackson.
motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? We are adjourned.